What's going on, my Jets family? I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. And we got some news. We got some big news. We got some holy crap, like huge news. So appreciate all you guys there. Appreciate you guys tuning in. So big news, absolutely huge news. And the huge news is that Zach Wilson may not be the starter this week. Now, I was gonna planning on coming to you guys already before the press conference even happened, just to talk to you guys. Excuse me, just to talk to you guys about my take on Zach Wilson from yesterday, which has completely changed. I mean, you guys know I've been the biggest fan of this kid for a long time, and a believer, really. I've been a believer in this kid, and I was going to come to you and tell you just how appalled I was with his performance yesterday and how terrible he was, and my whole take on Zach Wilson has changed. But we have breaking news. We have breaking news, and appreciate all you guys tuning in. We have breaking news as of literally just like an hour or so ago. So Robert Saleh's press conference was delayed. We knew it was delayed. I'm upset because you guys know I have my job. I was working. I wanted to bring it to you guys, but it wasn't going off on time. I was waiting at work. My job pretty much had ended. I was like, okay, I got to start heading home because, my commute is long as hell. Had a long ass commute home. Took like 2 hours to get home. I get home. I go on Twitter. I'm like, holy shit. Holy shit. So you guys remember yesterday, just yesterday, not even 24 hours ago, just yesterday, Robert Saleh was asked about considering benching Zach Wilson if he continued to play bad. He immediately said no, said that was the furthest thing on his mind. And he said, I told you guys before that Zach is our quarterback and we've got to find ways to help him get better. Well, the tide has changed. The tide has absolutely changed. Again, in less than 24 hours, Robert Saleh has now said that they are pretty much considering all options, that everything is on the table. Robert Saleh, as I mentioned to you guys, unfortunately, the press conference happened late. Like, I really wanted to bring it to you guys because I had a feeling there was going to be some news. I didn't know if it was going to be this freaking big, but I had a feeling it was going to be some news. So appreciate all you guys there. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. Just mentioned before how excuse me, and I want to hear what you guys think, like always. Please in the comments, shout it out. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know obviously, I mean, you're probably shocked too. I mean, not like it isn't deserved, and we're going to talk about that. Like, again, I was mentioned to you guys, just tuning in now, that I thought I was going to be just coming earlier today. I thought I was just going to be coming to you guys, giving you my take on Zach Wilson, how it's changed my opinion. Just yesterday's performance was abysmal. Like, terrible isn't even a good enough word. And I want to talk about that. I do want to talk about it, but this is huge, crazy news. Again, press conference was pushed back. Robert Saleh saying that it was due to a personal matter and he didn't want to talk about it. It's understandable, but he obviously had meetings today. And clearly those meetings were all about Zach Wilson. So I do want to stress again that, and it's my with my job and everything, I didn't get home until late. I didn't see the press conference initially. I watch it. I wonder what you guys think. Again, please let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Excuse me. I brought the press conference up on my device just a little while before we started. That's why, if you notice, I pushed the show back a little bit. Normally, I'm with you guys at 7. It's 7:30. I pushed it back because I wanted to listen. I wanted to be able to bring you guys my take, because as you know, it's important. I want to be able to tell you guys what I think. So when they asked Robert Saleh about it, again, I only heard it once. Usually I would listen to it a couple more times, but basically he was saying that he still hasn't gotten the chance to evaluate everything yet. He was saying that, he hasn't gotten the chance to fully look at the film. He hasn't gotten the chance to really evaluate everything that he wants to really get a full, this is what we're going to do. This is how we feel. However, he did end it by saying, I want to say that everything is on the table. And for you guys just tuning in now, that's a big ass change, right? Like, not even, well, 7:30 now. So I guess a little over 24 hours ago, right? Not too much, not too much over 24 hours ago. I guess what, 27, right? 27 hours ago, which still ain't long. 27 hours ago, Robert Saleh was asked about, again, like we were talking about, considering benching Zach Wilson. Said no, said it was the furthest thing on his mind. Said, I've told you before, Zach is our QB, and we've got to find ways to help him get better. Well, maybe benching him, and this is something, if you guys know, on my Sunday show, I tune in with Italy Jet and all those awesome guys. And again, please, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you're shocked. Maybe you're not shocked. Maybe you saw this coming. But originally, I was just going to talk to you guys about my take, right, on Zach Wilson, because my take has changed. And I wanted to make that clear because you guys know I've been, if not the biggest, believer in this kid. I was a huge fan of him coming out of college, and I wanted to talk all about it with you guys. How I was a huge fan of him coming out of college, and there were certain things that I loved about his play. But literally, we're going to talk about, but literally all those things I've loved about his play is what he's screwing up at the NFL level. Like, it's the things I was not expecting. So appreciate all you guys tuning in, but I'm assuming Wicker Man, appreciate you, bro. Wicker Man, appreciate it. You're spitting that fire. Says, as I mentioned, I came to you guys a little bit later because it's important for me to be up to date. I want to be able to talk to you guys about what's going on. So I did push it back to 7:30 because I wanted to be able to. And again, I didn't get to watch the whole press conference because it was late. It was pushed back, and I had to drive home from work. The traffic was insane. We're not going to get into all that, but the traffic was crazy. I was in the car for like 2+ freaking hours, but I got home. It was like a little after 6:30 or so, like 6:40 something, saw what happened. I was like, holy shit, right? Like, this is a major change, right? 27 minutes, huge freaking turnaround, like huge freaking turnaround. Jets Mets Mess is there. Yo, brother. Yo, what's up, man? So again, please let me know what you guys are thinking. I want to know your guys' thoughts. I want to know what you guys are thinking. So Jets Mess says, I want Flacco, not White. We have a win now team. Don't need White learning on the job. So I do want to talk about that. So here's what I thought was interesting. So again, just heard it just a little while ago. I again wish it was earlier so I could have, gotten it more and listened to it more. But the vibe I got from the little bit I heard from it was that Robert Saleh, excuse me. And as you guys may or may know, I'm also getting over a cold as well. If you saw me yesterday on Italy Jet show, I'm still getting over it. So my apologies with that. Excuse me. But if you go back to what Robert Saleh said, he literally said that he hasn't really gotten the time to look at everything yet. He said that he still wants to look at the film. He still wants to evaluate everything. He hasn't gotten the opportunity to do all that. So I do bring up, and as you guys know, I usually bring you all the press stuff myself, but just the timing of everything with coming home from work, the press conference being late, didn't get the opportunity to. So I do want to turn to two really great beat writers on the Jets, and those two great beat writers are Connor Hughes and Zach Platt. So shout out to the two of them. I'm going to be using them as my sources. So with Connor Hughes, basically the literal quote again was he said that we're keeping everything on the table. And when they asked him right after, I did hear this part, they asked him, excuse me, if he was committing to Zach Wilson for the next game. He said no. And that is such a huge turnaround. So Robert Saleh has now admitted, again, just after 27, right? 27 hours ago, that it was the furthest thing from his mind to potentially bench Zach Wilson. But now, excuse me, but now everything is on the table. What's interesting, and I want to go to Jets Mets comment, he says, I want Flacco, not White. We have a win now team. Don't need White learning on the job. The problem is, and we have to think about the truth here, not saying that Zach doesn't deserve to be benched, but we don't have really great options. We really don't. So let me show you guys. I want to bring it up here. If we look at what Mike White has done in 2021, he threw 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Not, again, that's kind of like what Zach did. His completion percentage is much higher. That's a point. His completion percentage is almost 67% as opposed to Zach, who's in the 50s. Man, Zach ranks like the bottom of the NFL and everything. Man, Zach literally ranks like in the bottom of the NFL in freaking everything. It's crazy. But so Jets Mesh, you point out, shout out, I want Flacco, not White. My problem is I don't like either of them as great options. I mean, honestly, after what Zach did yesterday, anyone's a great option. Like, put a freaking Jet jersey on one of us and put us out there at quarterback. We would be better options. So really, anybody is a better option from what we saw on Sunday. That And that's what, again, I thought we were going to be talking about. I thought we were just going to be talking about the absolutely horrendous performance that Zach Wilson put together. Like, terrible. Like, any word I could think of isn't even like terrible, abysmal is not even a good enough word. Like, if you guys didn't see me yesterday on excuse me, on the Sunday post game show that I do over with Italy Jet, we talked all about that. That my take on Zach Wilson has totally changed. So I guess we could, we'll come back to that because I do want to talk about the news and, like you guys said, how, maybe wanting Flacco not White. So we know the breaking news, right? We know the breaking news that in 20 everything's changed, right? From Zach Wilson is our quarterback, we believe in him, and that's the furthest thing from my mind. That now, which crazy, now everything is on the table, right? Now, when they asked him, here's what's interesting: when they asked Robert Saleh about who the quarterback will it be Mike White? He really took a step back and said, I don't know. It seemed like the common thread, and again, it stings because it was so late, the press conference. I was only able to hear it right before I came to you guys. But it seems like the common thread answer was that he doesn't have one yet. That was really what I got. The common thread answer from what I saw in the press conference is that he doesn't have an answer yet. He's still, like he said with Zach, I want to go back and look at the film, want to look at the tape. There's a lot of things I need to evaluate. He said there's a lot of things I have to consider. And he pointed out that it's not all the quarterback. He pointed out the running backs, how it's the offensive line, the receivers, everything plays a factor on the offense. But Zach Wilson was fucking awful, right? There's no better way to put it. Zach Wilson was fucking awful yesterday. He was so bad. And you guys know, again, I've been a big believer in this kid. I really believe, and I'm going to come back to my take on Zach Wilson and talk about how that's totally changed. But I want to know what you guys think. Again, let me know what you guys think here. So, like Jets Mess says, you're right, not much talent here. I think the best move would be to maybe get Bro, that's so funny. I freaking love it, man. I think the best move would be get Fitzpatrick out of retirement. Oh, that's so funny. Bro, another season of Fitz magic. Maybe, he almost took us there in 2015. Maybe he can come in and be the guy. Oh, that's funny, man. I mean, problem is you can't trade. Right? Trading isn't an option anymore because that was my first thought. Obviously, you can't, but my first thought when they asked, excuse me, Robert Saleh about even committing, will Mike White be the quarterback? He said everything is an option. That's what he said. He said the Jets are pretty much exploring all options. Anything and everything is on the table. So I think, again, the real thread comes back to that he wants more information. He wants to sit down. He wants to look at more film. So, and an important thing to also point out, he did say that they're not committing to Zach Wilson for Sunday. That doesn't mean he won't be the quarterback Sunday. And that's important to point out. He didn't say that Zach Wilson is not the quarterback. Again, he came back to. So shout out to Militia. Militia points out, I just saw a graphic that said out of the 53-man roster, it was a 50-0 unanimous vote that the team wants Flacco to start. I mean, I didn't see that. I don't know if I'd have to look that up. That's interesting. Appreciate Militia. Militia saying he's trying to find the source. That's interesting, man. I mean, Flacco's the veteran, right? Joe Flacco's the veteran. He's been to the Super Bowl before. And we talked about that, when Joe Flacco stepped up when Zach Wilson was out. You guys remember my take was, well, he's not the quarterback he used to be, but he's still, and that's the thing, he did struggle. We can't forget that, right? Joe Flacco did struggle, this year. He had some good, but also a good amount of bad, to the point where we wanted to bench him as well. We can't forget about that we wanted to bench Joe Flacco at one point. And last year, we weren't thrilled with Mike White at a couple of points. So, I mean, what's interesting in here, so when they asked, again, Robert Saleh about will he commit to Mike White, would Mike White be the guy? He almost put his hands up. He pretty much put his hands up and said that, we haven't decided anything yet. Like, I just want to make that clear. We haven't decided anything yet. No decisions have been made. That being the case, everything is on the table. And again, my first immediate thought, if you're like, well, we haven't made a decision yet, and none of these backups are really great options, my first thought is, man, trade. That's my first immediate thought, but that's not an option anymore. That's the thing. My first thought was, man, maybe a trade's in the process. Joe Douglas is a wizard, but that's not an option anymore. That ship has sailed. So that being the case, Joe Flacco is the veteran, right? I mean, again, we can't forget that he did struggle at times. We wanted to bench him at one point. He's a statue back there, right? We have to remember we were pointing that out, that when Joe Flacco is back there, he was a statue when he couldn't move and he was getting hit left and right. Our offensive line, and again, not making excuses for Zach, because Zach was freaking awful. And we're going to come back to that. Zach was freaking awful, awful, awful yesterday. Just performance pathetic. Like words can't, pathetic isn't even enough to discuss it. But that being the case, yes, the offensive line did not do him any favors, right? Nate Herbig is out. With Nate Herbig out, the second I heard Dan Feeney was in at right guard, I was like, oh, we're fucked. Excuse me, guys. My apologies, still getting over the cold. But right when they said Feeney was going to be in at guard, I was like, shit. Like, oh, man. And you guys know I've never been a fan of Abwehi. I've never been a fan of him. I mean, I talked about in his 8-year career, he'd only played over, before he came to us, he'd only played over 300 snaps in 2 seasons. And in those 2 seasons, he gave up 17 sacks. So I've never been a fan of Abwehi at all. Abwehi and Dan Feeney next to each other. Dude, my joke is like, we might as well have just taken them out of the game and put an extra tight end in to give like more receiving options, because they're just freaking turnstiles, literally. So I was like, shit, just take them out and put an extra option in somewhere. Like, forget, like they're just terrible. So Joe Flacco's a statue back there. We know that. And this offensive line is banged up. Max Mitchell should be returning soon, but we thought he was going to return last week. We also thought Fant might be back by now. So there's no guarantees, right? There's absolutely no guarantees. So like Jenny points out, agree, Jenny, losing Herbig was a huge loss. Absolutely huge loss. Dude, Nate Herbig has been awesome. He was an absolute Joe Douglas find. Absolute Joe Douglas find. Finds this guy, brings him onto the team. Young dude. He is a staple for our future. Him, Max Mitchell, and AVT are future staples of our offensive line. They are 3 young players that we should be building around. But we have to remember, out of those 3 guys, none of them are playing right now. Nate Herbig is totally banged up. I think it was Connor Hughes, shout out to him, pointed out that Nate's been banged up for a few weeks now. And that kind of the vibe is that he's not really going to get right. And he might play next week, but even if he does, he's not going to be 100. So that offensive line is not where it needs to be. That being the case, Joe Flacco's a statue back there. And we can't say Mike White. Mike White can run, right? Mike White can move. He's mobile to a decent extent. He's not the most mobile quarterback. That's how we have to look at Mike White. He's mobile, but he's not extremely mobile compared to like Joe Flacco. I mean, what he's Lamar Jackson, right? Compared to Joe Flacco, he's Lamar. I mean, the guy can move. So what do we do here? So it's important. And again, appreciate all you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys being here. The important thing to point out is, like Robert Saleh said, everything is on the table. But the important thing is, like he said, they really need to go back and evaluate more, right? They really need to go back. He said that, they haven't gotten the opportunity to look at everything yet. He's like, I want to look at more film, want to look at more things, probably needs to talk to Joe more evaluation needs to be made. But it's a huge turnaround. That's the breaking news, right? The breaking news is just yesterday, just literally after the game, right? Robert Saleh literally said that taking out Zach Wilson was the furthest thing from his mind, which just goes to show you coach speak, right? That just goes to show you coach speak. Clearly, if in less than 27 hours, they're willing to change that, it wasn't the furthest thing on his mind. It wasn't even close to the furthest thing on his mind. But that's just, again, coach speak, committing to the guy in the moment. Just like when we see players back guys up, even if they've had shitty ass performances, and they say, yeah, they can turn this around. We still believe everything's good. They're always going to say that stuff, right? A player's never going to come out and say that guy sucks. Or the coach isn't going to come out and say, yeah, this guy's freaking awful. That's not going to happen. So again, yes, they said furthest thing from his mind, but now everything is on the table. And we need to talk about that, right? So Adam points this out, and I was thinking the same thing. So again, nothing against Militia, appreciate you, Militia. Melissa just pointed out that he just subscribed. All you guys that haven't, if you could subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed to the channel, we'll greatly appreciate it. He said he was going to try to find the source and post it. Said post the graphic on Twitter. But I kind of got to go with Adam here, man. I mean, shout out to Adam. He's a good dude. He knows what he's talking about. I've had him on the show before. If there was a player vote, we know Joe Douglas, right? One thing we've always talked about with Joe Douglas, he runs a tight ship, right? That ship is tight. Shit don't come out. Right? We remember that. Like when Adam Gase was there, that ship had so many holes. You didn't have enough bail buckets. There weren't enough bail buckets in the world to save that ship. Joe Douglas's ship is tight. Things don't come out. That's why, again, Saleh told us it was the furthest thing from his mind. We were freaking out. Like, again, I was unfortunately driving home. I was unfortunately driving home from work. So when I get home, though, I see that all you guys were, and I don't blame you, you were freaking out because we run a tight ship. You didn't know. So we didn't know that this was the whole conversation today. Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh clearly had meetings, I imagine, for multiple hours. I imagine for multiple hours they had meetings about what they're potentially going to do and what they're potentially going to do moving forward. So Adam points out he's got to go. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you tuning in. Says don't let the Jets ruin your week. But man, all you guys here, this is big to talk about. So I really want to know what you think, right? Please tell me your thoughts. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Please tell me your guys' comments. Love to know. So we got Spin Max Dave here. Appreciate you, bro. Spin Max Dave. He says, good for Saleh. Zach is not untouchable. If you don't produce, like the way you put that, man. If you don't produce, you don't play. The prima donna will have to wake up or get splinters on his butt. Splinters on his butt. I like that, bro. I like that. So, very simple, right? Robert Saleh has now said everything is on. Again, please tell me what you guys are thinking, what you think, the options are, what we're going to do. But Robert Saleh says everything is on the table right now. And if he says, you got to read through it. If everything is on the table, everything is on the table, right? It's so they asked him again, Robert Saleh, they asked him, like 2 questions later, is Mike White going to be the guy? He threw his hands up. Like we said before, he threw his hands up and said, we still need to go back. We still need to look at the tape. We need to evaluate more. We don't know, right? We're not committing to anything yet. But this is huge. This is absolutely huge. And if they're not committing, that means maybe it's not as clear, right? I mean, if Mike White was 100% going to be the guy, if Zach Wilson wasn't going to play, because we do have to remember, just a few weeks ago, when Robert Saleh, I guess, does have a concrete fact, he says that. Like just a few weeks ago, you guys know I try to, bring you the press stuff as much as I can. Excuse me. Just a few weeks ago, they asked Robert Saleh about Mike White being the QB2 because Joe Flacco was inactive. And that's 100% what he said. He said, we did evaluation and Mike White is the QB2. So we know that when there's a fact, Robert Saleh says it, right? We know if there's a fact, like Robert Saleh said just that time that Mike White is the QB2, right? He's the QB2 of this team. So if he put his hands up and said, we don't know yet, everything's going to be evaluated, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Mike White. It could be Joe Flacco, like Jets Mess pointed out earlier. It could totally be Joe Flacco. But again, we got to remember, and this is what sucks, there really are no great options on our bench right now. I mean, granted, and it's important to point out, Zach was freaking awful. That offense was not, that's really what I was going to be mainly talking to you guys about before this major news happened. I was going to talk to you guys about my new take on Zach Wilson, how I felt about his performance, and how freaking pathetic it was, how my take has changed. My take has changed on Zach Wilson. It would be crazy if it didn't change, just like with Robert Saleh's, right? It would be crazy if his take didn't change. So my take has changed on Zach Wilson. Excuse me. And if we look at, obviously what he did yesterday, it was pathetic. It was, again, there's no pathetic, abysmal. It's insane. It's unbelievable. It was so bad that anybody would really be a better option right now, right? If what we saw yesterday is indicative of what we're going to see going forward, then anybody would be a better option. Joe Flacco, Mike White. But we do have to remember, again, like the offensive line is not in a good position right now. Like we said before, the three young staples of our line that we plan to build around, the best players on our offensive line were AVT out, Herbig probably going to be out, and Max Mitchell, who still isn't back yet. So all that being the case, the offensive line is bad. Joe Flacco has no mobility whatsoever. We saw how bad he looked this season, and we can't forget, right? We can't forget that we wanted to bench Joe Flacco earlier in the season, right? We do have to remember that we wanted to bench him. Like, that is a definite fact. So, shout out to Rise of the New York Jets. Rise of the New York Jets says, I would give Zach Wilson one more chance against the Bears. Remove the reins and let him rip. If he plays like crap, then you remove him. It is important to point out, like you're saying right here, this is not a committal thing yet, right? Robert Saleh didn't say it's official. Zach Wilson is not the quarterback. He said everything is on the table, and he was asked if you have committed to Zach Wilson being your quarterback on Sunday. He said no. But then he went on to talk more about Zach Wilson. So again, just shout out to Connor Hughes, and shout out to Zach Rosenblatt, using them as my sources, because again, the press conference was pushed back so much that, excuse me, I wasn't able to report on it because I was driving home from work, unfortunately. But things to point out, like Connor says, Robert Saleh said the Jets need to look at what's best for the organization in regards to QB play. They need to look at what's best. And that's an important statement to make, right? Because what we saw freaking yesterday is not what's best, right? So he went on to say some praise about Zach Wilson, but he did point out that Zach Wilson does need to take accountability. And that's a major thing to talk about. And again, I want to know what you guys think. Please let me know your thoughts. Let me know your comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the chat. But that was crazy yesterday. And I pointed it out, on Twitter as well, that his performance was awful. Zach Wilson was god awful yesterday. Yes, he's still a young QB. Yes, he's still learning. Yes, he could still turn it around potentially, but it was terrible. It was awful yesterday. That being the case, the biggest thing, the most disappointing thing was his lack of accountability, right? The biggest, most disappointing thing was Connor Hughes literally gave him a softball question. Literally, he literally teed him up. Connor Hughes basically teed him up, put the ball on the tee. Excuse me. My apologies, guys. Connor Hughes literally put the ball on the tee and queued up freaking Zach and literally said to him, do you feel like the offense let the Jets defense down? Of course they did. The freaking defense, like in the first game, I talked about it on Twitter during the game. Just like the first time we played the Patriots, the Jets defense was the only thing that kept us in the game, just like in that first game. And in that first game, there were positives to talk about, right? Zach had thrown for 350 yards. He'd thrown for 2 touchdowns. There was good. We were like, we just have to clean up the bad. There was no good yesterday. There was absolutely no good yesterday. So I do want to pivot, and I do want to talk to you guys about my take on Zach Wilson, because I know you want to hear it, right? I know you want to hear my new take on Zach Wilson. So let your friends know, tell them to come on in. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about my new take on Zach Wilson. So you guys know that if anyone had been a bigger Zach Wilson believer, it was really me, right? I was one of the first people on him, back in December, saying that, December of last year, saying that I really liked what I saw in the kid. The things that I liked, the things that I saw, the things that I felt would translate to the NFL level, that's not what I'm seeing this year. And that's what's really upsetting me. The biggest thing to point out is Zach Wilson is not even close, really, to where I expected him to be. That doesn't mean he's not going to get there. That's an important thing to point out. It doesn't mean he's not going to get there, right? But it's huge, right? So again, please let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know, what thoughts you have. I'm very, very curious. Please share it with me. But man, this is absolutely crazy. So my take, obviously, again, on Zach Wilson, I was a big believer, right? And I'm not saying I'm not. I'm not saying I don't still think that he could potentially turn it around, right? But my take has totally changed. So what he did yesterday is ridiculous. What Zach Wilson did yesterday There's no words. Like I said, like abysmal, pathetic, awful. There's not enough words to really put to what he did. Zach Wilson threw for less than 100 yards. And let me just bring up my numbers because I wanted to share it with you guys. Zach Wilson threw for less than 100 yards. This is the craziest stat to me. This stat still infuriates me. Braden Mann punted the ball more than Zach Wilson had completions. That just, I'm still struggling with that fact. I'm still struggling with that. Braden Mann punted the ball more than Zach Wilson had completions. Zach threw for 77 yards. He didn't even average 4 yards a freaking throw. Now, at first, I'm watching this and I'm feeling, okay, maybe the wind is playing a factor, right? There's a huge wind on the field. We know that, right? There's a huge wind on the field. And it affected the kicker, right? We saw it with Greg Zuerlein. He had to kick that ball like a freaking line drive, and he had to aim it to the left to get it through the goalpost. Excuse me, you guys. So I thought the wind was playing a factor. But you can't say the wind was playing a factor based on what Mac Jones did. Mac Jones had a great freaking game. Mac Jones was 23 for 27 with a great completion percentage, almost averaged 10 yards per carry, and at almost 250 yards. So you can't use that excuse. That excuse doesn't work. And if you watched it, again, we all watched the game. Zach was awful, man. You can't sugarcoat it. So again, you guys know, and I was saying it before, I was a big believer in Zach. I really, from all the things I saw in college, I really thought that it would translate to the next level. And I want to talk about that stuff for a sec. So one of the biggest things you guys remember I loved about Zach, my favorite thing, absolute favorite ththing I loved about him from college at BYU was his pocket awareness, right? I loved his pocket awareness. I loved what I felt was, because it looked that way, he had innate pocket presence where I felt he could sense the pressure and he adjusted so well. And he was great as like what Robert Saleh calls off schedule, right? He was great at falling out of the pocket and trying to make a throw that way. Well, that's something he's really struggled with this year. So we look at his rookie year. It's crazy. It literally looks like Zach Wilson has regressed. I mean, when he first started playing last year, he wasn't that good. He had struggles, but he was a rookie. He was a rookie playing in his first few games. We expected that. When he got hurt and he came back, he turned it around, right? He went from having, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but he went from having only a few touchdowns and like 7 interceptions to like 9+ total touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. He was progressing. He was looking better. Excuse me. And you guys remember, it looked like he was progressing. It looked like he was getting better. And all the things that we were seeing, I was liking what I was seeing, even though the numbers weren't great, right? And appreciate all you guys tuning in. Appreciate all you guys who were there. Even though the numbers weren't great, right? Even though he was still didn't have great completion percentage, he wasn't putting up amazing yards. I liked the things I saw. I felt like I saw a young quarterback developing, and I liked the things that I saw, like his pocket awareness last year. But like everybody's been pointing out, he escapes out of the pocket way too quickly. He escapes out of the pocket way too quickly, and he doesn't seem to want to set his feet and read the field 100%. And again, as I saw in college, it looked like an pocket presence because as guys were coming through, he was literally breaking out. But now it's really coming across as happy feet. It's coming across as he is kind of nervous to stay in the pocket, right? That he bails out of the pocket way too quickly and he makes bad reads on the field. And that was the other thing I liked. I liked his ability at BYU to read the field. I went back and looked at the film and I felt like if you looked at it, you could see, well, this receiver was covered. You could see him making reads and making progressions. I literally felt that way. And you guys remember that. I would put out film of, look at this from Zach Wilson at BYU. Look at this progression he's going through. Look at these reads he's going through. I would point out how so many people were saying, oh, at BYU, BYU, the competition, wasn't the same. I was saying how that was a good thing, right? How he didn't have great players around him like the other guys like Fields had, like Trevor Lawrence had, that he was elevating the guys around him. Well, that's the opposite right now. And that's the thing that's making me the most crazy. And again, my take on Zach Wilson has changed, right? So again, I definitely want to know what you guys think. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please let me know what you guys are thinking. But I honestly felt, and excuse me, guys, I honestly felt if you looked at what he did in college, I felt that, he was going through progressions. It definitely looked that way. He's struggling at that massively. He's struggling massively at this level. And we pointed it out. People have been pointing it out for a while now. If you look at this offense, there's clearly open receivers. There's clearly open receivers. There's clearly guys that are open that he's not seeing. He's not reading the field great. And that was surprising to me. The other thing, right? The biggest thing that's one of the biggest problems Zach Wilson had in yesterday's game, his accuracy was awful, right? Throws with guys literally 10 yards in front of him, 5 yards in front of him, guys right in front of him. Excuse me. He was overthrowing them. And again, there was wind, right? There was wind, but Mac Jones wasn't doing that shit. Mac Jones was playing well. So, excuse me. Give me one sec, you guys. If I go back to what I liked about him in college, I liked his accuracy. You guys remember last year in his rookie year, he had, a lot of games where accuracy was an issue. And I even pointed out, well, if you go back and I evaluated him at BYU, that wasn't a problem of his, right? Accuracy wasn't an issue at all. In fact, he seemed to really do well, again, reading pressure, going out of the pocket, finding an open receiver, going through reads, and putting the ball in that guy's vicinity, making a good throw, being accurate. So my assumption last year, and we talked about this, right, that my assumption just last year was that, well, it's got to be something else, right? Maybe it's he's struggling with reading plays on an NFL level. Maybe he's struggling in this offense. Maybe he's struggling with progressions. I don't know what it is, but it didn't seem like accuracy was a problem of his in college. Well, his accuracy was pathetic yesterday. Again, going back to his performance yesterday, there isn't even a word. Pathetic, abysmal, disgusting for a quarterback, an NFL quarterback, to have 9 completions out of 22 throws, to average to average 3.5 yards a throw, only have 77 yards. In the second half, Zach Wilson only threw the ball I think 2 times. Two completions. Zach Wilson, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but in the second half of yesterday's game, he only had 2 completions for 14 yards. He was pathetic. So appreciate all you guys, see your guys' comments. Like Melvin points out, 9 for 22 for 77 yards. After a bye week is even worse, right? I mean, after a bye week, you guys had 2 weeks to prepare for the New England Patriots. You guys had 2 weeks to get your shit together, right? So after a bye week makes it even worse. But Melvin, like you said, how does if Zach Wilson did what he did yesterday in his first game ever at the NFL level, we would be tearing his ass apart even then. We'd be like, holy shit, this kid sucks. This is his second year. So there's a lot, again, want to go through all of it with you guys, because as you guys know, I was a huge, I'm not going to say I'm done with the kid, right? So Zach Wilson, to put a little positive on it, right, because it's important to do that. Zach Wilson is still a young kid. His play has been terrible. Right? His play has been terrible. He's had a couple of bright spots. He's had a couple of good quarters, good plays, but overall, his numbers are awful. They're literally at the bottom of the league. His numbers are literally at the bottom of the league. And, excuse me. I've been trying to overlook that because, again, not saying that they're not bad, right? Not saying that they're not bad, but I tried to, give him, maybe not overlook. Overlook isn't the best word, benefit of the doubt. That's better. I tried to give Zach the benefit of the doubt. You guys remember, my whole take was always, he's a young quarterback. He's learning, right? There's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. My big take always, right, was that is he learning from those downs, right? It's with the ups and the downs. Is he learning from those downs? Is he not making the same mistakes? Is he suffering from Sam Darnold syndrome, right? Is he suffering from Sam Darnold syndrome where he goes out there and continuously makes the same freaking mistake over and over and over and over and doesn't learn shit? Is that what's happening? I felt in that Patriot game that wasn't the case. I felt he made a bunch of mistakes, bad mistakes, but they felt like different mistakes. Felt like not throwing it all the way out of bounds, making a bad read, throwing it off your back foot with a guy in front of you, which was just insane. His decision making has been shit. And that is a very important thing to point out. So appreciate all your guys' comments. Appreciate all the things you guys are saying. So Melvin points out that I love the fact that, and he means Saleh. I love the fact that Saleh is putting the team first over Zach Wilson. This message may give us another spark, like the receipts comments. It is. It's big because it's kind of like I saw, shout out to Connor Hughes. Connor Hughes pointed out that he's very confident. He feels very confident that Mike LaFleur is not the issue. I'm not 100. I'll be honest. I am not. I don't know what you guys think. I'm not 100. I feel like we've seen games where Mike LaFleur has adapted beautifully. He's changed his play calling, right? Where he was doing this and then did that because it wasn't working, or adapted to the weaknesses of what the other team was doing. Then we've seen games like yesterday where Zach Wilson was a big factor. Zach Wilson was a major factor on why yesterday sucked, but there was no adapting. There was no changing anything. Excuse me, you guys. There was no changing anything. It was really, really bad play calling still. There was really, really bad play calling, right? Excuse me, you guys. There was really, really bad play calling, no adapting, right? And it was bad. So I'm not 100% sold on if LaFleur is 100% the guy, but, it is important for Saleh to, put the team first, and that's a big thing to do so. By doing this again, just yesterday, he said, we're not moving on from Zach Wilson. To make this decision this quickly shows the commitment to winning football, right? Robert Saleh has made a commitment, just like us fans. And that's kind of like, I'm talking about my takes on Zach Wilson. I believe, or I don't want to say believed past tense. He could still be the guy. My faith has gone down. That's a very big factor. My faith has gone down, but I want to, believe that Zach Wilson can, be the guy potentially. But above all things, I'm a Jet fan, just like you guys. Above all things, I'm a Jet fan, and I want to win. I want us to be competitive. I want to see our team do well. We are winning, right? And I talked about this again on my Sunday, the Sunday post-game show I was on with Italy. We were literally talking about that. Excuse me. We were literally talking about that, if Zach Wilson hadn't had such an awful game, if he wasn't so god awful that had to be the topic of conversation, if he had played decent, then we would have turned around and been like, well, our defense was amazing, right? That was a fact. Our defense was outstanding. Just like in the first Patriot game, our defense is what kept us in the game. The defense was absolutely awesome. And our pass rush has been amazing. Our pass rush, the best word to describe our pass rush, relentless. Relentless is the best word. Our pass rush has been absolutely relentless. It has been consistent over these last couple of weeks, consistently getting to the quarterback, and everybody is feasting. Everybody along that defensive line is feasting. You guys remember we weren't sold 100% on their rotation at first. Excuse me. Excuse me, you guys. We weren't 100% sold on the rotation at first because it wasn't working those first couple of weeks. But once we started seeing it working, we love that rotation because guys are staying fresh. We're seeing guys like Huff coming in the third, fourth quarter, juiced and ready to go. He ain't gassed at all because we got this rotation. So our defense was outstanding. And if Zach Wilson wasn't so god freaking awful, we would have turned around and been like, you know what? We're 6-4. That's not the worst, right? If we keep, there's still 7 games left, right? There's still 7 games left. We could we could definitely still have double-digit wins. We could still have 10, 11 wins. It's still possible. And that was, excuse me, that was something that, in the beginning of the season, we didn't even want to think of, right? We're like, well, if we can get 8 or 9, that'd be awesome, right? Double-digit wins would be amazing. Double-digit wins would be incredible, right? Well, that's what we would have been like. We would have been like, well, we're 6-4, right? The season's not over. Even though we're in the last place in the AFC East, it's still extremely close. There's 7 games left. We could win. We could easily get back to the wild card. We could easily, we could easily even come back to first place. But Zach Wilson's play was so bad, so bad that it took the focus away. It took all the absolute focus away from, that conversation. The conversation that the season isn't over. Yeah, we lost a game, but we're 6-4, right? We could still have 10, 11 wins, right? Make our way, like we said, back into the wild card, even potentially take first place. It's still possible. With 7 games left, we could still do that. But the quarterback play was so bad that if Zach Wilson played like that more, it's not even in the realm of possibility. If he plays like that again, it's not even the realm of possibility that we win another game. That's how bad he freaking played. He was god awful. It was terrible. So, excuse me. So it's important, Robert Saleh, like you said, Melvin, is putting the team first. And that's crucial because Robert Saleh, again, is saying it's all we're saying it's about the Jets, right? It's not about one specific player. It's about the New York Jets. We're here to make the New York Jets better. We're here to keep winning, turn this culture around. And that's an important thing to talk about because the locker room, guys. So like I mentioned earlier when we first started the show, and to apologize, I'm a little sick, so trying to do my best. But in the beginning of the show, we literally talked about that, Zach was awful. Zach was god awful in that game. But the most upsetting thing to me was his lack of accountability yesterday. Again, like we said, Connor Hughes, it wasn't even a softball question. He basically put the ball on the tee and said, okay, Zach, get ready. Get ready, Betty. You can do it. He teed him up. He's like, did the offense let the defense down? No. You guys, and I don't blame you, Jets Twitter ripped Zach's ass apart, and he deserved it. He deserved to have his ass ripped apart because we saw what Josh Allen did in the week we played the Bills. Josh Allen, an infinitely better quarterback than Zach Wilson. 1,000% better quarterback than Zach Wilson. He came out after that performance and said, it wasn't okay. I need to be better. Quarterback play can't be shit. That's what you want to hear. The fact that Zach took no accountability was crazy. Again, you guys ripped him apart. I don't blame you. He deserved to have his ass ripped apart. Absolutely deserved it. That was terrible. And what does that send to the locker room? That was my biggest fear. I talked about it this morning. We have a culture change going on, right? Even if we say Zach isn't the guy, let's just say that. Zach isn't the guy. This team, and we were saying this just a few weeks ago, we're so pissed off, and many people were pissed off with how bad Zach Wilson is playing because of how good this team is, because this is a playoff team with, again, arguably the best defense in the NFL. You can easily argue that we have the best defense in the NFL. Unfortunately, we lost Breece Hall. He'll be back next year, man. Can't wait for that. But we have we have a good receiving room. Obviously, it'd be nice if Corey Davis is in there, but Garrett Wilson, young emerging star, Denzel Mims playing well as of recently, right? Corey Davis, again, we'd like to have Corey Davis back. Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios. It was absolutely awful. It was absolutely awful yesterday. Again, I'm disgusted. I am absolutely disgusted to the pit of my stomach. So again, just coming back, because I do want to bring up your guys' comments as well. Coming back to Zach Wilson, coming back to Zach Wilson and my thoughts, my thoughts about, how my take on him has changed. He's nowhere where I expected him to be. Zach Wilson is nowhere near where I expected him to be based on the things that I loved about him in college. The innate pocket awareness, the ability to go through reads and progressions, unlike what I saw with the other quarterbacks. You guys remember my whole take on how with those other teams, there were progressions built into their systems. BYU didn't have that. I loved what I saw. All those things that I loved, I'm not seeing this year. But what's insane is I was seeing them last year. I felt like I was seeing them last year, and I'm not seeing them this year. So shout out to like what Melvin said. Melvin said Zach Wilson is regressing big time. That's what it is. It totally looks like he's literally regressing in front of our eyes. And it's freaking heartbreaking. So, again, like I mentioned to you guys, I've been the biggest Zach Wilson supporter, right? I was the biggest believer in this kid, probably argue over anybody. But even now, I would say what we saw yesterday was disgusting. And again, his numbers have been bad. I've been hoping to see it get better. So we talk about, the press conferences, like we said. Last year, you guys remember I, bring you the press conferences, I bring you, all the press and stuff like that. Last year, I loved all the things Zach Wilson was saying. Right? I love the things that he was saying, how he was working on certain things, how he was learning. He was saying the right things. He was showing that he was learning. He was showing that he was progressing. I was saying things like, that's my quarterback, because I was so excited in the things he was saying. The lack of accountability is out of control. The lack of accountability is just insane. It is just absolutely disgusting that he did not take accountability. And what's worse, excuse me, there have been rumors, and what we're hearing, Connor Hughes pointed it out and others as well. There were rumors that within the locker room, there's a belief that Zach Wilson doesn't think that he's the problem. That is insane. That is literally insane. If Zach Wilson, and again, these are rumors, this is what we're hearing. It's within the locker room. We said before, Joe Douglas runs a tight ship, right? Joe Douglas's ship is tight. Things don't come out. So we don't know 100% if that's true. But if Zach Wilson is really walking around thinking that he isn't the problem, that's out of control. Zach Wilson, you are 1,000% the problem right now. And again, he's a young quarterback, right? You guys remember my whole take on him, right? He's a young quarterback. He's developing and progressing at this league. There's going to be good and there's going to be bad. Remember, my big thing was that he has to learn from that bad, right? He has to not make the same mistakes. Show us that he can be an NFL quarterback. That's not what he's doing. That's absolutely not what he's doing. So appreciate all your guys' comments. Melvin points out Flacco has more touchdowns in 3 weeks than Zach has in 7. It's crazy. Yeah. Flacco has more touchdowns in 3 games than Zach has in 7 games. Zach's been awful. And again, I'm not saying the numbers haven't been. And if you asked me in the past, I would have told you. The numbers are not good. The numbers overall, his completion percentage, one of the worst in the league. His touchdown to interception ratio, one of the worst in the league. Literally every category, he's toward the bottom of the NFL. But again, I'm like, he's a young quarterback. He's developing. I believe, that he can be the guy. My belief is wavering. My belief is 1,000% wavering. And my big take, what I would say is, and I talked about this again yesterday when I was on the show with my post-game show. I said that, everyone was saying, remember Robert Saleh was saying earlier in the season, it's too early to sound the alarm on Zach Wilson, right? It's too early to sound the alarm. Well, I still feel, and again, not that yesterday wasn't awful. Yesterday was pathetic. Yesterday was literally what I'm still so angry. Like literally, you can see it in me, guys. I'm still so angry thinking about yesterday's performance, thinking about how utterly pathetic we were yesterday and the way we lost that game. Like even just getting into that, the way we lost that game was just a slap in the freaking face. Like that was like, if that couldn't have been any worse, the way we lost that game, thinking we're going into overtime, like, okay, it's 3-3. This offense has been pathetic, literally non-existent, just god awful. The defense has kept us in this game. It's 3-3. We're going to overtime. That was brutal. That was absolutely, that was the cherry on top of the fucked cupcake. That was yesterday. That's literally the way to look at it. So like Melvin points out, Melvin says benching is on the table, but I think he's going to but I still think he's going to start, but have a short leash. That is an important thing to note. And I mentioned that before, right? Robert Saleh, you guys give me just one sec. Robert Saleh said that everything is on the table, right? Robert Saleh said everything is on the table. We're looking at all options, right? But when he said, are we committed to Zach Wilson? He said no, but he didn't necessarily say Zach's going to be benched. So Zach could be benched. The big thing, and I do want to come back to this, I stress this importantly, from what I saw in the press conference, the biggest thing from Robert Saleh was we need more information. That was the biggest thing I got from Robert Saleh, that we need more information to make an assessment. He said we need to go back to the film. We need to look at more. We need to look at, obviously, we know it was bad. We know it was freaking bad. But he wants to see how bad the reads were, how many, and we know there's open receivers. He wants to see how many open receivers there were, how bad Zach was at going through his reads, going through his progressions, how bad his decision making was. So we know he was bad, but everything is on the table. Like Melvin says, benching is on the table. He could still start. That's important to point out. Zach Wilson could still potentially start. And if Zach Wilson does start, I think it's not just them saying, okay, he was awful, but we still want to see what we have in him. I think it's also an acknowledgement, like we were saying before, that there's not really great options, right? That's an important thing to remember. We don't really have the best options, right? Joe Flacco, like we said before, he did have some good plays this. He did look okay at times this season, but he also looked really bad. We can't forget that we all wanted to bench Joe Flacco at one point, right? And Joe Flacco, like we said earlier, is a statue back there, right? Joe is a statue that can't move, literally can't move. And our offensive line is banged up and not in very good shape, right? We said before that right side is a freaking the right side is basically non-existent. Basically, Dan Feeney and Cedric Abwehi might as well not even be out there. Excuse me. They might as well not even be out there on the field blocking, because it's basically like they're not on the field blocking. So we don't have AVT, obviously. We don't have Nate Herbig might play, but we don't know, right? He was supposed to play in the last game, but like, Connor Hughes pointed out, he said again that Nate Herbig is kind of banged up to the point where the Jets feel that he may not be 100% at all the rest of the season, that if he does play, it won't be at 100%. And we thought Max Mitchell would be back already, but he's not. He could still be back this week, right? His window was open. We talked about that just the other week, right? That Max Mitchell's window has been opened. They have 21 days to activate him, but he's still not been activated yet, so we don't know. That being the case, the offensive line has been awful. The offensive line that we currently have on the field with all those guys out is absolutely freaking awful. And that being the case, Joe Flacco is going to be sacked 1,000 times. Joe Flacco's ass is going to be sacked 1,000 times. Again, he can't be worse than Zach was yesterday. And that's an important thing to point out. Him, Mike White, shit, even Streveler would not be worse than he was yesterday. So, kind of talking about Streveler, that's an interesting one. So, when they did ask again, Robert Saleh, about will Mike White be the guy, it is interesting. Remember, just a few weeks ago, Robert Saleh committed to Mike White as QB2, right? He said Mike White is QB2. That's why Joe Flacco isn't active, right? But he wouldn't. When they asked him, well, is Mike White going to be the guy? He still said, we don't know yet. We're looking at all options. So could that just be that they don't want to say yes or no on Zach yet? And that's why they're saying they're not sure? Maybe that could be it. Or maybe it could be they're not sold on Mike White, right? We have to remember that Mike White, although again, can't be as bad as what we saw yet freaking yesterday, he hasn't been great either. Neither one is really a great option. So let's talk about Streveler for a second, right? Let's talk about Chris Streveler. So again, Zach Wilson's not doing what I expected. Obviously not doing what any of us expected. He's nowhere near where I expected him to be. Excuse me. But if Chris Streveler is Chris Streveler, is sorry, let me backtrack. The things I liked about, and the things we all liked about Chris Streveler were the same reasons we felt that Zach Wilson fit well into this offense, because Chris Streveler is a mobile quarterback, right? That can move out of the pocket, make plays outside of the pocket and make things happen, especially with his feet. That's the kind of thing this offense, especially a West Coast offense, needs. Now, that being the case, we do have to remember that we saw Streveler playing against backups. We can't forget that. We saw Streveler playing against not just second stringers, but mainly third stringers too, and guys that probably had no business being on an NFL roster. What he would do against starting NFL players is a totally, totally different story. So, is it possible that we could see Zach Wilson just because they feel like the other options are worse? That's very possible. It could be not as much like, again, if there was a better option on the bench, like Teddy Bridgewater, let's say, right? If the Jets had Teddy Bridgewater on the bench, I think Robert Saleh might have committed to him today. Robert Saleh might have been like, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be our quarterback, because benching Zach Wilson, let's talk about this for a second. Benching Zach Wilson, even if, and again, not saying he's going to be benched, but benching Zach Wilson doesn't necessarily mean it's over for him, right? We have to remember Mac Jones was benched. Sometimes benching a quarterback is a good thing, right? It's important to be able to say, you're not doing well, buddy. You're holding our team back, and we're not going to blindly follow you. Because let's look at the attitude he had, right? I pointed out earlier in the season, I pointed out last year as well, one of the things I loved about Zach Wilson was his confidence, right? I loved the confidence that he had, the way he portrayed himself, the swagger that he had, the way he didn't let anything get to him, right? He said just the other week that he doesn't listen, or he doesn't believe that anyone outside the organization knows what they're talking about. Right? That was the comment Zach Wilson said, that he doesn't believe anyone outside the organization knows what they're talking about. And you guys remember, my take was, I like a quarterback with confidence, right? I want a guy that's not going to dwell on that interception. I want a guy like we saw earlier in the season when, remember, we were losing and Zach Wilson comes out at the end of the game and goes, let's get a fucking touchdown, boys. And they all get freaking hyped up. That's what I want to see. That confidence is a good thing, right? You like confidence like that. Excuse me. You like confidence like that from your quarterback. You want 10-second memory. You don't want him dwelling over interceptions. But that being the case, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, right? There's a difference between being confident and being an arrogant asshole. And that was absolute arrogance. If Zach truly believes that he is not the problem, that's an arrogant asshole attitude. And that's not even close to true. Not even close to true. Zach, you are 100% the problem. This offense is very talented around you. We know that because, again, Flacco wasn't great, but we saw this team produce. We even saw this team produce when you had good games. Let's remember that. When you actually played well, this offense produced. Again, the offensive line is not that great, and that's what makes me nervous about Joe Flacco. He's a statue back there, and this offensive line, as of right now, is a freaking train wreck. Unless Herbig and Max Mitchell are ready to go, that changes things. But if both of those guys aren't ready to go, man, Dan Feeney and Cedric Ogbuehi, it's almost like there's nobody there. It's literally almost like there's no one. Like I said, I'd rather line nobody up there and try to have an extra guy somewhere to give us. I think we'd have more of an advantage in that aspect. So I appreciate your guys' comments. Appreciate everything you guys are saying. Please let me know what you guys are thinking. So Melvin points out Belichick has Zach Wilson's number. I pointed that out yesterday too, right? Almost all, not all, but a good percentage of Zach Wilson's interceptions have come against the New England Patriots. Zach Wilson's worst games, without question, have come against the Patriots this year. The two games that we were questioning, obviously after this one, you can't not question him, and even the coaching staff is questioning him. But the two games where we were questioning Zach Wilson were the Patriot games. Bill Belichick totally has Zach Wilson's number. He absolutely has it. And I talked about it yesterday. Here's my take on why. If you think about it, give me just 1 sec. I'm going to keep you guys in suspense for just 1 second. So We talk about Bill Belichick having Zach Wilson's number. And here's something I don't think that's talked about enough. We have to remember that the New England Patriots drafted Mac Jones the same year Zach Wilson went, which means the Patriots were 100% looking into Zach Wilson. They were 100% studying him and looking at, can he be the guy and could he potentially fall to them, right? It wasn't expected. It wasn't expected for him to fall. But clearly, if they were looking, if they took a quarterback in that draft, they took Mac Jones. Clearly, they were evaluating quarterbacks. Clearly, they evaluated Zach Wilson. So, excuse me. Bill Belichick, and I don't think people were thinking about this part. Bill Belichick has Zach Wilson's number because he clearly knows him really, really well. He studied him enough to know, okay, well, this is what Zach Wilson likes to do. This is the kind of throw he likes to make in this situation. When you pressure him like this, he does this. When you do this to him, he tries to look for this option. I think that's downplayed a little bit. I think, again, the fact that they took Mac Jones that year, that shows that they were looking at Zach Wilson. They probably didn't think he was going to fall to them at the pick he had, but they were looking at Zach Wilson. I think Bill Belichick has his number. I think he knows as of right now, unless Zach Wilson is going to turn this around like Josh Allen did, right? Josh Allen became an entirely different quarterback, right? In his second year, he was a totally different quarterback than he was in his first year. Zach Wilson is not. So all the things Bill Belichick knew about him, he comes into it with that approach, right? Bill Belichick, again, I guarantee it, you guys, that Bill knows. He's like, okay, Zach Wilson, like we were saying, right? Zach Wilson likes to do this. He favors these kind of guys. These are the plays he does well in. These are the kind of reads he struggles in. If you apply this kind of pressure, this is where he screws up. Or if you do this to him, he tries to do this, or he tries to throw to this guy, or he tries to escape like this. Guarantee he has his number. And because of that, we're seeing what happens. Again, Zach has more interceptions against the Patriots than anybody. It's ridiculous. They absolutely have his number. So we go back again, talking about Zach. Is he going? We don't know if he's going to be benched, right? We don't know. It's a possibility, but it's huge, right? It's absolutely huge news that the Jets are talking about the potential now that everything is on the table, right? This is our young quarterback that we figured this is the year to evaluate him, right? But what we saw yesterday, like again, like we talked about earlier, just there's no words. There's absolutely no words. So you guys are tuning in now, appreciate you guys. Basically, in a nutshell, my take on Zach Wilson has changed, right? My take on Zach Wilson has changed. He is not where I expected him to be at this point. That's not to say he could get better, right? Again, Mac Jones was also benched. We have to remember that. Mac Jones was also benched because he had really bad games. And the Patriots decided this was a good move to make. And look what he did. He's played better since he was benched, right? Maybe it was having that sideline perspective. Maybe like last year with Zach Wilson, right? Maybe last year when he came back after being hurt, he played better. It was talking to guys on the sideline, getting a different perspective, whatever it was. But man, Belichick definitely has his number. So I definitely want to get to all your guys' comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Jenny points out MLF has been up and down too. I'm telling you guys. I mean, and here's the way to look at it, right? I put this out, earlier on Twitter. We look at our wide receiver room. Denzel Mims wanted a trade, right? Denzel Mims earlier in the season wanted a trade. Elijah Moore did his whole freaking thing he did. He wanted to trade, albeit he did it in a much more immature and shitty way, right? He had an outburst in front of the team and then requested a trade on social media when he was told to go home and chill and relax. So that was a freaking sucky way to do it. Absolutely sucky way. But yesterday, this is what really shocked me and I wanted to talk to you guys about. Do you guys remember Garrett Wilson's comments? Garrett Wilson's comments yesterday were huge, right? Garrett Wilson was clearly frustrated. And the things he said surprised me, really surprised me. So we look at talking about what Garrett Wilson said. So Garrett Wilson first started off by saying things like, we all got to take responsibility and build each other up, come ready to work, but have a plan. I like this part. He said, you can't just be passively working and you can't just be in the facility and not know what we're there for. That's big. Garrett Wilson saying, again, you got to have purpose, right? You can't just, doing work is not enough. If you're putting in shitty work, it's still shitty work, right? You need to be having a purpose. But what really surprised me were the comments that came later, right? And I put it out to share with you guys. I thought it was so crazy. So they asked Garrett Wilson about the offense. You can clearly hear his frustration, right? He's like, we've got to have a better plan. This shit is not okay. It's literally what he said. Garrett Wilson said, this shit is not okay, straight up. This shit is not going to fly. We got the dudes. It's time to be consistent. It's time to start winning the games we should win. But it's some of the comments, again, he made after that really started to surprise me. So Garrett Wilson said, it starts in practice. It's got to be better. He said, things we see and don't call out, shit's got to start getting called out. I was like, whoa, right? When he said that, I was like, wait a minute. That's a huge comment. Wait a minute. That's a bombshell right there. Garrett Wilson is saying that there are things in practice that even him as a rookie wide receiver in his first year in the league, he's seeing things that he thinks are not okay. Maybe he's referring to Zach Wilson. We didn't know, right? Kind of seems like he was. Kind of seems like he was in this moment that Robert Saleh is saying, we're going to evaluate everything. But he said there's things we're seeing in practice that we're not calling out, and it needs to start being called out, right? And after that, he also said, I thought this was interesting. He said that, honestly, I feel like they've got to put more trust in the wide receiver room. That was interesting. He said, I feel like they've got to put more trust in the wide receiver room. I feel like we can go up and make plays. We can do things. That's big. That's really big. So again, Garrett Wilson making these comments, he's a rookie. So when Denzel Mims, the whole point I was getting with all this, with Denzel Mims requesting his trade, that we figured, okay, obviously he's a young kid, we excuse me, we hoped he would be a part of this offense, but it didn't work out last year. We saw, in this offseason that he was in better shape. He came back better. We thought he'd be a part of it. He did it the right ways, right? He didn't do it like Elijah Moore's way. So we were like, okay. Then Elijah Moore's outburst happened, and we totally blamed him. We're like, Elijah Moore, that was immature as shit, right? That was absolutely immature. The way you handled this was terrible. But now with Garrett Wilson, our emerging superstar wide receiver coming out and making these comments, man, that clearly tells me if we have 3 wide receivers now that have 2 of them have requested trades, 2 of them are not happy with what's going on, it's got to be the quarterback or the OC, or it's got to be both. And that's what that tells you. That tells you it's got to be the quarterback and the OC or both. So, like you say, Jenny, I'm not 100% sold on Michael LaFleur either. I'm not. And again, I want to know what you guys think. Please let me know your guys' thoughts. So Jenny points out, Moore needs to be out there more to make more plays. He did in this last game, right? Moore was out there more, and that's, kind of the funny way to put it, more of more, right? Moore was out there more, but it was a bad offense, right? The offense was absolutely atrocious, and that was because of Zach Wilson, right? Again, the offensive line didn't do him any favors. The offensive line was awful. The running game was non-existent. But please, guys, please don't take that as I'm making an excuse, because I'm not. You guys who have been here since the beginning, I've done nothing but shit on Zach Wilson from that performance yesterday. Again, my take on Zach Wilson has changed. He is not where I expected him to be at this point. Again, and you guys remember, I mentioned this before, it doesn't mean he's not going to get there. We've seen plenty of quarterbacks, good quarterbacks too, suck for their first 2 years and then turn it around in year 3 and get better. I'm not saying that's definitely going to be the case. We don't know. But what we saw yesterday was pathetic. What we saw yesterday just can't fly. So if you're going to bench Zach Wilson, you're making a statement that what happened yesterday was pathetic, right? You're not making the statement that we don't think you can be the guy. And it's important that Robert Saleh did stress that in the press conference again he had today. I do want to stress he said some positive things about Zach Wilson. He said some positive things about him. He also said that he does lack the accountability. And again, that was one of the biggest takes we talked about. Right? That was one of the biggest things we were talking about, that lack of accountability, disgusting, right? Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, so Melvin points out, Melvin said Salah said he watched film on the plane ride home. He had to be disgusted. I mean, we were disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted with what I saw in that game. It was awful. I was fuming. I was so pissed in yesterday's post-game show. I'm still pissed now. Every time I go back and think about the offense and think about Zach Wilson's play yesterday, I get furious. I get angry. It was absolutely awful. So Robert Saleh said he watched film on the plane ride home. I do want to stress, though, he said obviously not enough, though. Right? He said, obviously not enough. Robert Saleh said, we still have things we need to look at, right? We still have film we want to look at. We're not sold. And that was the biggest thing I do want to point out from the press conference that Robert Saleh had today. The biggest thing he said was, we don't have answers yet, right? The big take is that he did go from saying yesterday that Zach Wilson is not, yesterday saying that Zach Wilson being replaced is the furthest thing from my mind, right? That he's totally our quarterback and we have to find ways to support him. Clearly, by saying now everything is on the table and saying he's not committing to Zach Wilson is absolutely huge. But the big stress thing he kept saying was there's more we need to do. There's more we need to look at. There's more we need to evaluate. And he did point out that it's not just, and again, Zach Wilson was awful. Zach Wilson was 100% the problem, but he did say we want to look at more things. He said we want to look at, he said it's not just to him. We know it was definitely the quarterback, but he says it's not just the quarterback. He says we want to look at the wide receivers. We want to look at the offensive line. So again, he wants to see what's going on, right? So Melvin points out, good point here, right? Melvin points out benching helped Tua, right? Says benching helped Tua. It could do the same for Zach Wilson. That's 100% possible, right? That could 100% be the case. And we saw the same thing with Mac Jones, right? Just because you're benching him, and we're not saying he's going to be benched, right? That's important to stress. Robert Saleh said everything is on the table. He's not committing to Zach Wilson, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be benched. He could be benched. That's the big takeaway. It went from yesterday, where furthest thing from my mind, not even in the realm of possibility, now it's definitely possible. Now Zach Wilson could be benched. Doesn't necessarily mean he will, but like you're pointing out here, Melvin, benching helped Tua. Tua's been great, right? Tua's been absolutely awesome this year. That's shout out to Melvin. That's an absolutely excellent point. Tua's been really good this year, right? Many say that even though the Bills, obviously, excuse me, even though the Dolphins still own the division now, most people would be saying, oh, the Bills are going to take it. The Bills are going to take it. There's a lot of people that still think the Dolphins could keep it. There's a lot of people that still think the Dolphins could keep the division, and that's because of the play. There's other factors as well, but Tua's play is a major factor as well. So benching helped Tua. Benching also seems to be helping Mac Jones. Benching a quarterback doesn't necessarily mean it's over for him, right? Benching could be a good decision, especially after such a truly bad performance, right? So Melvin points out we're truly a QB away from going deep into the playoffs. That was the big thing, right? Just a few weeks ago, everyone was saying, well, this team is ready to go and it's being held back by the quarterback. And you guys remember, my take was not a disagreement, right? My take was not a disagreement of that. It was that we all expected, right, that when the play became great around Zach Wilson, that when we had great players around him, that he would all of a sudden elevate to a great level, right? That was kind of an assumption we made. So again, I'm not refuting that, right? Everyone was saying that this team and we know that, right? We have a playoff team. Our defense, arguably the best in the NFL. Our defense was, just 1 second. Our defense was awesome yesterday. Absolutely outstanding. And it's been outstanding through the whole season, not the whole season, but the majority of the season, our defense has been outstanding. Like we said, our pass rush has been relentless. Everybody's feasting. We have the best corners in the league, man. Sauce is easily the best corner in the league, in my opinion. DJ Reed, excuse me, is a top 5 corner, makes them the best duo in the league. Michael Carter II is really good as well. We have great coverage. Arguably, again, the best defense in the NFL. And our offense is really talented as well. So, yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we all felt after that, ironically, last Patriots game, right? Bill Belichick totally has Zach Wilson's number. And we talked about why I think that's the case. But we were saying just a few weeks ago, a lot of people were saying that we're a quarterback away from this team being great. You can't lie. You can't argue that. But again, I thought the biggest thing was that we all assumed just because there was great players around Zach Wilson, because the offense was so talented now, that he would all of a sudden play at a great level, that he wouldn't still make rookie mistakes and still potentially have problems. However, again, what we saw yesterday was god awful. What we saw yesterday, you can't make an excuse. It was just absolutely pathetic. Like absolutely pathetic. Like crazy how pathetic it was. So again, appreciate all your guys' comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking. So Patty points out, appreciate you guys, Patty the baddie. What's going on, Patty? What's going on, man? Patty points out, Jets need Jimmy G. Man, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Jimmy G. I'll be honest. And I've talked about it before with you guys. I don't think Jimmy G is a friend. He's not bad. He's not a bad quarterback. But I look at him kind of the way you would look at, I guess, Mark Sanchez, kind of like that. If you put a good team around him, he can play well. But he is not going to elevate the team. We saw that in the Super Bowl. I don't think he can be a great quarterback. That's the truth with Jimmy G. I don't think he can be a great quarterback. So shout out to Jenny. Jenny points out, so what if Zach plays Sunday and does great? I can't take this roller coaster anymore. It's very possible, right? I mean, he's a rookie, right? That's the whole point. He's a rookie. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Zach Wilson's second-year guy. I was thinking of Garrett Wilson for a second. Garrett Wilson, Zach Wilson is a rookie. So, I keep saying, sorry guys, I've been sick. So Zach Wilson is playing in his second year. We expected better, right? We expected absolutely better. He's been really bad, right? His numbers have been awful. His play has been really, really bad. So if he plays Sunday and he does great, it's a roller coaster. I mean, it still doesn't change the fact that he's been bad, right? We do have to remember that. So if Zach Wilson plays well, obviously, I mean, interesting to think about, right? So if Zach Wilson does play well on Sunday, what could that mean, right? It's a roller coaster, right? You say, Jenny, it is 100% a roller coaster. Like I've said, I believe, there's a lot of things I love about Zach Wilson, right? There's a reason I felt in the past that I really, and again, I'm not saying I don't believe. I'm not saying I've gone from believing to not believing, but my take has 100% changed. My take on Zach Wilson has 100% changed because it's bad. It's been absolutely bad. The numbers are bad. The performance is bad. And, I figure, like I pointed out, he's a rookie. He's a young kid playing at, learning at the NFL level. There's going to be good. There's going to be bad. But this has been really bad. This has been absolutely awful. So even if he has a great game, he's got to have more of them. He's got to continue to have great games. I mean, he's only in his second year, right? Zach Wilson's only in his second year. It's crazy to think, we're going to cut him. It doesn't mean the Jets may not look in other directions, but it doesn't mean they're not going to want to still see what we have in this kid, right? And that's really the point. It doesn't mean we're not going to want to see, what we have in this kid, if he can potentially be the guy. That's the whole point of the season, right? The whole point of the season was to evaluate and see if Zach Wilson can be the guy, right? So, yes, I want to get to all your guys' comments. Appreciate all of them. I want to throw all of them up. So, I believe it's funny name, it's Jizzy. Funny name, man. He says, I'm convinced the defense destroys the offense in practice, and you can't tell me Zach Wilson looks great in practice. That's just nonsense. That comes back to Garrett Wilson's comment, right? That comes back to, again, I was surprised. Garrett Wilson said, I'll go back to it, right? Garrett Wilson literally said that, it starts in practice. It's got to be better. There's things we see and don't call out. That stuff needs to start getting called out. That surprised me, right? That absolutely surprised me because that's a rookie. Right? We said before, that's a rookie wide receiver, an emerging superstar in our offense. It's crazy how upset, like if he's upset and he's got a problem, then we have a problem, right? If Garrett Wilson, our young emerging superstar, is already upset, we 100% have a problem, right? So, yeah. Melvin points out, LaFleur is dumbing down the offense and Zach Wilson still can't execute. It's clear. And that's really the problem. And that's why you can't, it's really hard to defend Zach Wilson at all right now. His play yesterday was pathetic. Like without going through the numbers again, just thinking about the fact that Braden Mann had more punts than Zach Wilson had completions. Our offense had 7 total yards in the second half. If you have 7 yards on a few drives, I would be pissed. They had 7 total yards in the entire second half. So here's an interesting one. I want to shout out to Rusty Spooner. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you, Rusty. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. Do apologize. I am a little sick, so just starting to have a little bit of trouble. My voice is starting to go. But Rusty points out Lamar is a 23 unrestricted free agent and has his own agent, his mom, right? His mom is the one batting for him. We wouldn't have to give up any draft picks either. I would be shocked if Lamar Jackson goes anywhere. Now, I know there's the whole thing with the contract. I know he turned down the money. The Ravens know what they have in Lamar Jackson. So obviously, you guys know, again, I was a big fan of Zach Wilson. Clearly, he's been bad so far. But I do want to point out, and you guys know we've talked about it as well, going through, the QBs I've liked. Back in 2018, my guy was Lamar Jackson, if you guys remember. I was a huge Lamar Jackson fan, just like the reason I liked Mekhi in 2020, because if you guys remember, you guys who have been following me since the beginning, appreciate all you guys. Shout out to you. You guys who have been following me from the beginning know that my dad went to Duke. So I grew up watching Duke football, Duke basketball, and a lot of ACC. So I watched a lot of ACC football, ACC games. So I was a big Mekhi Becton fan. I also was a big Lamar Jackson fan. I couldn't believe the disrespect Lamar Jackson was getting when they were saying he shouldn't be a quarterback. You guys remember that? That pissed me off. That made me angry. I was like, just because he's super athletic and he's fast as hell, do you watch him throw the ball? Have you seen Lamar Jackson play quarterback? So even in his rookie year, you remember all the people saying Lamar couldn't be the guy. I firmly was saying Lamar Jackson is a franchise quarterback. So going back to Jimmy G, I'm not a fan of Jimmy G. I am not a fan of Jimmy G. I personally feel that, he can be good. He can be like a game manager. He can be good. If you put a good team around him, he can play well, but he's never going to be a great quarterback. He's never going to be that top NFL guy, which is really what you want. You want to find that guy, right? You don't just want to find a guy that can manage, right? Lamar Jackson is that. So I do want to say Lamar Jackson is a franchise quarterback. And think about this for a second. You guys know the one guy I've been sold for the longest is Joe Douglas, right? Joe Douglas has 100% always been my guy, right? Like I loved this guy, loved everything he did, everything. We don't have to go through it, just love Joe Douglas, right? Been saying for the longest time, this guy's a great GM and people are finally going to start to see it, right? Well, one of the reasons I love Joe Douglas, he came from the Ozzie Newsome school, right? He came from the Ozzie Newsome school of drafting with the Baltimore Ravens. And what did Ozzie Newsome do? We know all the great players Ozzie Newsome drafted, all the great Hall of Famers that he brought in. But what does he do? Like a freaking G, on the way out in his last year, what does he do? He gifts the Baltimore Ravens Lamar Jackson. After all the great he did for the Baltimore Ravens, he says, I gift you your quarterback of the future. This kid is going to be the guy. And I'm telling you, I felt that way back in 2018. I was like, I wanted him at 3. I knew people were going to give me shit for it, but I wanted Lamar Jackson at 3. I personally would have pulled the trigger at Lamar Jackson at 3 back in 2018. I really believed he could be a great quarterback at the NFL level. Loved his play. Couldn't believe, again, all the disrespect he was getting. People saying he wasn't a franchise quarterback, right? Sorry, that that he couldn't be a pocket quarterback, right? Which is not the case. He can throw well from the pocket, right? Lamar Jackson, now all these people are talking about getting Lamar, right? A lot of conversation about getting Lamar. I'll be honest, and I could be wrong, right? I could be wrong. And if Lamar Jackson is a possibility, sign me up. If Lamar Jackson is a possibility, where do I sign? Like, where is the paper for me to sign? Like, I love that. If Lamar Jackson can be a possibility, that's awesome. However, I don't think it is. I don't think Lamar Jackson is a possibility, even though, again, they didn't get the contract done, right? Even though they're still working things out. I believe the Baltimore Ravens know what they have in him. I believe the Baltimore Ravens know the things that I felt for a while, that Lamar Jackson is a franchise quarterback, not a wide receiver like they were saying in his rookie year. He is a franchise quarterback. He is a guy that can take you the distance. I don't see him going anywhere. I hate to say it, Spooner. I mean, I don't know if you guys let me know what you think. If you guys think differently, if you guys have a different opinion, please let me know. But I think the Baltimore Ravens know what they have in Lamar Jackson. I think the Baltimore Ravens know how good he is. Again, it didn't get done yet, but I think it's going to. I think it's going to get done. I would personally be shocked if Lamar Jackson doesn't stay with the Baltimore Ravens. So shout out to Boycott Activision. All you guys out there, appreciate your guys' comments. Appreciate all your guys' thoughts. So Boycott Activation says, how many quarterbacks have put up these types of numbers and turned it around to be a star besides Josh Allen in the last decade? He says, I'm giving him till game 12 to be competent, or I'm done with him. Hey, some people are already feeling like they're done, right? Some people, you see it on Twitter, right? Some people are already, I'm done with Zach Wilson. And again, I'm not saying they don't have a right to feel that way, because again, as you know, I've said to you guys, as much as I believe that and I'm not going to say past tense, I still believe that, Zach Wilson can be a franchise quarterback. I hope. Maybe the belief should turn into hope. Maybe let's turn it to hope. How about that? Let's turn it into hope. I hope Zach Wilson can be a franchise quarterback. And the reason I feel that way is because, like all of you guys, I'm a Jets fan. I'm a Jets fan for and foremost. I want our team to win. I want us to be successful. I want to see us continue to win, make it to the playoffs, win Super Bowls. This culture change, man, I want to see it take off. So if Zach is not the guy, then we need to figure that out, right? We need to, again, he had an awful game, but like kind of Jenny pointed out, right? What if Zach comes out and has a great game next week? Well, then we're like, we don't know. And if you guys remember, I put it out after the game. That was kind of my immediate first take on Zach Wilson when I first thought about it, right? I was like, well, he was awful, right? He was absolutely god awful. And he's looked very bad at times this season. But he's also had some good play as well. And he's a young kid that's learning and developing. My truth answer was, I don't know anymore, right? Can Zach Wilson be the answer? I don't know. That was my take. I just don't know. So shout out to Boycott Activision. Boycott says, how many quarterbacks, again, have put up these numbers and turned it around. What he did yesterday was pathetic. I mean, I can't stress enough. If a quarterback in their rookie game, playing their first game ever in the NFL, did what Zach Wilson did yesterday, we would still be tearing his ass apart. We'd be saying, holy shit, we made a terrible decision. What the fuck have we done? This is not the guy. Zach Wilson did that in his 20th game, 21st game. Zach Wilson should not be having games anywhere near in the realm of being that bad. So I'm not saying he can't turn it around, right? That's, again, I do want to stress he's a young guy, right? Young quarterback. I felt last year, I felt like he was saying all the right things. Clearly, he's not right now, right? The lack of accountability is disgusting. The lack of accountability is out of freaking control. Out of control, that he would say that the offense, not even himself, right? That would have been a great opportunity when they said, is the Jets offense what held the defense back? That would have been a great opportunity for him to say, not the Jets offense, me. I'm what's holding this team back. I need to be better. I'm sorry. He doesn't even have to apologize. He could say, I'm sorry, but he could just say, I need to be better, right? We saw it with Josh Allen. He 1,000 times better, right? A quarterback that's 1,000 times better, a playoff quarterback in Josh Allen, literally with his bad game against the Jets, took it all and said, I was shit. The quarterback play was shit. I need to be better. That lack of accountability was terrible. Again, Zach Wilson's play yesterday was, again, words can't even describe it. Abysmal, terrible. I want to flip my table in anger again, just thinking about how awful, awful yesterday was, minus the defense, right? Just how bad that offense and Zach Wilson was. Excuse me. But like Boycott Activist is saying, can he turn it around? It's possible. So that's why, again, you guys were asking earlier, should Zach Wilson be benched, right? So I do want to bring up, your guys' comment. You guys have some great comments. Do appreciate all of them. So Melvin points out, you said we are 8-2 with Jimmy G. Again, Jimmy G is the kind of guy on this team. And that's an important thing. I do want to give you that. On a very quality team like this, Jimmy Garoppolo can play well. But he's not going to be a great quarterback. He's not going to be a guy like we saw when they were in the Super Bowl that's going to be a guy that can take you the distance. If you need him to do that, it's not going to happen. I have always felt from watching Jimmy G that he is a great system quarterback, that he is a great quarterback. He is a great system quarterback that if you put him in a good system, he can play well. If you put a good team around him, he can play well. But he's no Lamar Jackson. Like not even close to that. So shout out to Kevin. Kevin says, Zach's future aside, I really like our head coach and GM. I hope they'll be, I see you said you corrected it with the other one with us, saying, I hope they'll be with us for a long time. And that's the point, right? Shout out, Kevin, man. 100% correct. That's exactly the point, man, right? That's exactly freaking it. That obviously the GM, you guys know, I've been sold on Joe Douglas for a while. Joe Douglas is the guy. Joe Douglas is freaking great. Think about everything Joe Douglas has done since he was given the keys. Right? We know I've talked about it. You guys have talked about it here with me, right? How when Adam Gase was here, he was handcuffed. He wasn't able to do everything he wanted to do. He was drafting for an Adam Gase team. Since Joe Douglas has been given the keys, look at everything that's changed. Look at how much of a turnaround we now have. Arguably the best defense in the NFL. We have a team, like we're saying, that minus the quarterback, this is a great team. That this is, like we said, Zach Wilson is holding us back because that's a fact. Again, my big take at the time was we kind of made the assumption that because the team was great, Zach would be great too, that he wouldn't still struggle like young quarterbacks do. But we felt that because the team was, that Zach Wilson was holding the team back because it's so great. Defense outstanding, and the offense has a ton of potential. So, man, Joe Douglas, you guys know that's my guy. You guys know that's my guy. Joe Douglas is a great GM. And Robert Saleh, he's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things. It's a complete culture change, right? We talked about it from just, this last offseason with all the players coming here because of Robert Saleh, right? All the players coming here because of who he is. Excuse me. Because of Robert Saleh being here, because of the culture change he was bringing to this team. And these last two drafts, insane. Since Robert Saleh has had a hand in it, these last two drafts, out of control. They are arguably, can potentially be, the problem is with Zach Wilson, right? And that's important to talk about. If Zach Wilson is not the guy, it muddies last year's draft class, right? Even how great AVT was, even if Elijah Moore winds up being really good, all the other talent we got last year, if Zach Wilson isn't the guy, it really screws up, how great that we can look at that draft class because the quarterback is everything, right? The quarterback is absolutely everything. But man, we say, Robert Saleh, love, the culture he's bringing in. But again, what he's doing right now is such a major step. And this is important to talk about. What he said today is such a major step in acknowledgement that this team is not about Zach Wilson. This team is not about, appeasing Zach Wilson or anybody. It's about winning. It's about the Jets. It's about putting the best potential product on the field to win, whatever that means. And remember, Robert Saleh said, we're evaluating everything, right? And that was the big take I said when we talked about the press conference, that he said, that Zach Wilson, he may be benched, he may not be. We don't know what the options are going to be, but it came down to we need to evaluate more. right? We need to evaluate more. We need to go back to the film. We need to look at more before we make a decision, right? That being the case, excuse me, that being the case, it shows it's all about the Jets, right? It shows, and that's what we want to see, that he's willing to come out and say, yeah, basically, he's not saying, Zach was awful yesterday, but he's basically saying that he was, right? That's basically that he's saying that everything is now on the table. In literally what we say, less than 20 in 27 hours, a complete full day turnaround, Robert Saleh went from unequivocally, Zach is our guy. That's the furthest thing from my mind, him not being the quarterback, to now everything is on the table. It's because it's about the Jets. It's because it's about winning. It's because it's about putting the best potential product on the field for us to win. And like we said before, if Zach Wilson didn't have such an awful game, if Zach Wilson didn't play so badly, we would be talking about, hey, we're only 6-4, right? We lost this one game, but we're still 6-4. We still have a winning record. If we win a couple more games, half the games, we almost have 10 wins. We almost have double-digit wins. We can easily work our way back into the wild card. Shit, we can even retake the playoffs. And that's the point. It's about putting the best product on the field. So Joe Douglas gets it. Robert Saleh get it. They know that this team is ready to go. This team is ready to win now. So if that means not saying, that we're giving up on Zach Wilson, right? If Robert Saleh is saying that means, well, he's clearly struggling, right? He's a young kid that's clearly struggling with all this talent around him. If we bench him, you put Flacco in, or even let's say Mike White, if one of them plays really well and they start winning games, we could get into the playoffs. Something could happen here, right? That's the whole point. It's an acknowledgement of it's about winning. It's about putting the best product on the field. Not saying again that if we bench Zach, he's not our answer ever, right? That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that if we bench him, there's no way he'll never be our quarterback, right? Shout out to Melvin. He pointed out before how Tua was benched in the past, and look at how good he's doing, right? Last year, Tua was literally benched, and people were shitting all over him, right? All over Tua. And that's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point where I was getting with, where, I mentioned this, just a couple of weeks ago, where I hope it wasn't, obviously it's kind of looking like it is the case. That's what kind of sucks. It's kind of looking like it is the case, but we've seen quarterbacks that struggle in their first 2 years and then start to figure it out in year 3, finally start to put it together and finally start to get better. So benching, and again, it's an if, right? We don't know if the Jets are going to bench Zach Wilson because, again, like we talked about before, the options aren't great. We said before, the offensive line is banged up. The offensive line is not good right now with statue Joe Flacco, right? Joe Flacco, who can't move back there, he's going to be sacked 1,000 times. Joe Flacco gets sacked 1,000 times. That's not good. And Mike White is more mobile. He's definitely, I wouldn't call him a very mobile quarterback. He's more mobile, though. That being the case, we've seen what? In the games we've seen with Mike White, he's had what? 1, maybe 2 really good games, and the other games haven't been good. So it's not like we're seeing the opposite, right? It's not like we're seeing, well, here's a quarterback that plays really well when he's, when he's on the field, he should be the guy. So it could literally be, and it's crazy to think, but it could literally be we're sticking with Zach Wilson because he's the young guy, and we just don't like the other 2 options, right? It could literally be as simple as we don't like the other 2 options. So that's why we're thinking. Again, my big take was right when they asked, and I appreciate all you guys out there. If you haven't, if you could please subscribe to the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated. Those of you could subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. If you haven't, appreciate all you guys. Shout out to everybody out there. Appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As you guys know, I mentioned, I hope you guys are, enjoying my energy because I'm actually very sick. I have a cold and I've been with you guys for almost 2 hours. So I'm trying to bring you guys as much as I can, trying to bring you my energy, keep it up here, be able to keep telling you guys what I think. So again, if you guys can subscribe, it'd be greatly, greatly appreciated. But coming back to the whole situation, if they bench Zach Wilson, that doesn't mean we're saying he can't be the quarterback, right? That we're not saying that he can't be the guy. We're saying that you're playing badly. What you did in that game is unacceptable. What you did yesterday is completely unacceptable for an NFL level quarterback. Like we said, if a quarterback did what Zach Wilson did in his first game ever as a rookie, we'd rip his ass apart then. And this is a quarterback in his second year. So clearly, what you did was unacceptable. If we bench you, that's a statement of that. And again, the attitude Zach Wilson has, benching him could change that, right? The lack of accountability is terrible, absolutely bad. And you guys remember my big take was, yes, he was awful. Like, there's not even enough bad words, right? Abysmal, awful, pathetic. There's not even enough words to explain how bad Zach Wilson was, right? But that being the case, the lack of accountability was the worst part. The lack of accountability when they literally, like we said, the softball question of did you let the defense, did the offense let the defense down, saying no, is out of control. That is an out of control answer. Again, we saw Josh Allen, a much more seasoned quarterback, a proven quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We watched him eat crow because that's what you do. We watched him say, my play was shit. I need to be better. So, and as we pointed out before, there are rumors that Zach Wilson, that there is conversation within the locker room that Zach Wilson believes that he's not the problem. And like we said before, Joe Douglas runs a really tight ship, absolutely tight ship. Any room, if it's a rumor, we don't always 100% know if it's substantiated because, again, Joe Douglas doesn't let much, and Robert Saleh as well, they don't much let slip, right? That's why when we were told this information today that now, the Jets were looking at all options, it was like a panic. We all went crazy, right? Because we didn't, excuse me, they didn't give any indication of that, right? We didn't know if that was going to be the case, right? So that being the case, like we were saying, if Zach Wilson's benched, it's an acknowledgement of you were god awful. What you did yesterday is completely unacceptable for an NFL level. And maybe sitting down could not just be good for his play, but also for the attitude, right? For him to be able to come out and have a better attitude, and, like we saw last year, right? Say things that I saw last year. I saw in his press conferences, he would say things that made me feel good about him, made me feel confident about him, right? I felt like he was learning. I felt like he was getting better, right? Clearly, that ain't the case, right? So appreciate all your guys' comments. Kevin, shout out to this one, Kevin. So Kevin said, what about Derek Carr? So you guys, and like I always mention, please let me know what you guys are thinking. Please, let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know your thoughts. If you agree, disagree, please let me know. So we mentioned Jimmy G before. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Jimmy G. I think he's, again, a system quarterback. He can be good with good players around him. I love Lamar Jackson. Absolutely love Lamar Jackson. Back in 2018, that was my guy. I was like, couldn't believe the disrespect that he was getting, saying he should be a wide receiver or he should be something else just because he's so athletic. He's an excellent, excellent quarterback. And even in his rookie year, so many people are saying, well, Lamar Jackson's not a pocket quarterback. My answer was just wait. Just wait and you will see. You will see what Lamar Jackson is, and he's proved it. I would love Lamar Jackson. I would do a backflip for Lamar Jackson. I don't think it's an option. I honestly think that even though, like we said before, even though the Baltimore Ravens have the whole issue right now, they haven't re-signed him. He feels slighted because he wasn't offered the money he wants. They know what they have in him. Look at it kind of like the Aaron Judge situation, right? Even with Aaron Judge, going to baseball for a second, even with Aaron Judge not being re-signed by the Yankees, there's still a massive feeling that that's going to happen, right? Because they know what they have in him. Same thing with, excuse me, same thing with Lamar Jackson. So I could be wrong. And again, if I'm wrong, it would definitely be something to pursue. That's definitely something I would love to pursue. But Lamar Jackson, the Ravens know what they have in him. Again, we were saying before, I love Joe Douglas, right? Joe Douglas is my GM. You guys know what I've been saying, how great Joe Douglas is and how everyone's going to see it from his trades to everything he does. That being the case, we said he learned from Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Newsome gifted the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. He knew exactly what he was doing, right? Ozzie Newsome One of the greatest drafters ever. Look at all the Hall of Fame players he brought in. What does he do at the end? Right on his way out, he gifts the Baltimore Ravens with their quarterback of the future. Again, I was saying it back then. This is their quarterback of the future. I can't see them letting him walk. I see a deal getting done. I just don't see it happening. So Rusty points the same thing out. Rusty points out, Lamar is a more accurate version of Michael Vick. 100%, man. 100%. I couldn't believe the disrespect this kid was getting coming out of college. You could say as well, racial stuff is well included, right? A lot of racial connotation there because people were talking about how, well, if he was a white quarterback, people wouldn't say that shit, right? Some people were saying that because he wasn't, because if he was a white quarterback, people wouldn't be saying that stuff, right? But the fact that people were even saying he should be a wide receiver or he should be something else, that's out of control. I, again, always felt Lamar Jackson, again, like I mentioned to you guys have been following me way from the beginning, know that I'm a big ACC guy, that I mainly watch ACC football. I loved Lamar Jackson. I thought this kid had a great arm, great accuracy, and he plays well from the pocket. Even in his rookie year, when everyone was like, he's not a pocket quarterback, like I said, I was like, you guys will see. You guys will see how great Lamar Jackson is. So again, I love Lamar. I just don't think he's an option. So I want to come back to what Kevin said. That's an interesting one. That is an interesting one. So mentioned, not a fan of Jimmy G. Love Lamar Jackson. I do like Derek Carr. I do like Derek Carr. He is another quarterback that I feel that's underrated. I feel Derek Carr is underrated. That is somebody I would pursue. So that is somebody I would pursue and let's look at it this way, right? This Jets team is stacked, right? It is ready to go. And that's what we're saying, right? We've been saying that the quarterback play is literally what's holding this team back. That being the case, we have to look at our draft history, right? Not saying we're moving on from Zach Wilson yet. Even if they bench him and decide to trade for somebody, Zach ain't going anywhere. They're keeping Zach to potentially learn, right? See if maybe he can be the guy. We used a second overall pick for him. We have to remember that. We used a second overall pick for Zach Wilson. There is no way that he is going anywhere, right? So even if we decide to go in another, decide to bring in a veteran, Zach still stays, rides the bench. They're hoping he can learn. They're hoping he can learn and get better and maybe learn from that veteran potentially, right? Or maybe they think about trading him. Maybe they see what they can, even though obviously you can't, just thinking about it. I mean, he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, right? Every category, he ranks like the worst in the league. So I can't see getting a great trade for him. But that being the case, I do like that one, man. Kevin, I do really like the idea of bringing in Derek Carr. So my question for you guys, if you want to, let me know what you guys think in the chat. My question for you guys, what do you think that would cost? What do you think it would cost to get Derek Carr? That's my question for you guys. So again, not a big fan of Jimmy G. I really don't like him. I'll be honest. I'm really not a fan of Jimmy G. I think he can only get you so far. And I do love Lamar Jackson, but I don't think he's an option. Again, I don't think the Baltimore Ravens are stupid enough to let that man walk. They know what they have in him. They will get it done. I am 100% confident that the Baltimore Ravens will get it done with Lamar Jackson. That being the case, again, Derek Carr is an interesting one. So appreciate you, Dakota. Dakota's got the broken heart, the green heart with the broken heart, bro. That's how we feel, guys. Our hearts are broken right now because it's rough. That game was disgusting. It was so aggravating. It was pathetic. It was an absolutely pathetic game. Absolutely pathetic, agitating. So Dakota also points out, if we win like we should, New England loses to Minnesota, then we go from fourth to third. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's an important thing, like I mentioned earlier, and what I was talking about earlier. Zach Wilson's play was just so god awful. It was so horrible to watch that it made us forget that we're still in this, right? And that's the whole point that the Jets are considering this. Think of it this way. If we had a losing record If there was no possibility for us to have a winning season and no possibility of us making the playoffs, I don't think benching Zach would be an option, or I don't think they would consider benching Zach. That's my take. And I don't know, you can guys, again, like I always say, let me know if you think I'm crazy. Let me know if you guys think I'm wrong. But I do believe that if we had a losing record and there was no potential to make the playoffs, no potential for that whatsoever, they wouldn't consider benching Zach, as it would be, okay, what's the point? It's over. We're not making it anywhere. Why don't we see what we have in this kid? Why don't we see if he can turn it around? We are a winning team. This is a team that's ready to win now, right? So, and that's why people talk about bringing in veteran quarterbacks, right? We saw it with the Denver Broncos with Peyton Manning, right? That was a team that was stacked. That was a team that had, like the Jets right now, one of the best defenses in the NFL and a really good offense. It just needed a quarterback. Input Peyton Manning, they win a Super Bowl, right? They try and do the same thing now with Russell Wilson. I mean, it's not working as well. It's not working as well, but they're trying to do the same thing. And we've seen that with other teams as well. I don't know why I'm blanking on my other example. I had a totally other example in my head, but we've seen before where teams, you guys want to maybe help me out. I can't think of the other example, but we've seen plenty of times where, where, they bring in a veteran quarterback. And on that is the other kind of point I was getting at before as well. But you guys know me, we go down so many rabbit holes. We go down so many different holes, and we say one thing and then I think about something else. I forget what we were originally talking about. We say one thing, I'm like, what makes me think about that? Where I was going with, and it's tough to think about. We've had the worst luck when it comes to drafting quarterbacks, right? I mean, we have to call a spade, right? We got to call it for the truth. We've had, and again, I'm not saying Zach isn't the guy yet. We can't yet, but he's looked like shit. He's looked like absolute shit. That being the case, we go back to Sam Darnold. We go back to all the quarterbacks. Geno Smith, we drafted a quarterback that wasn't playing well. Now he's finally playing well a decade later on another team. We personally have had the shittiest luck when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. That being the case, like we just said, this is a stacked team, right? This is a stacked team where our defense is arguably the best in the NFL, right? Our defense is arguably the best defense in the NFL, and we've seen it all these weeks. Even in this last game, the offense was non-existent, and our defense somehow kept us in the game. That is just insane to think about. Like, to just look at I don't even want to talk about it again. Like, I've mentioned it to you guys at least 10 times. It gives me agita. It gives me indigestion to even think about. But we talk about, we talk about, how bad Zach Wilson was. Our defense literally kept us in that game. We have arguably the best defense in football, right? After we beat the Buffalo Bills, they asked DJ Reed about it, and DJ Reed said he thinks we have the best defense. And I spoke to you guys on here. I was inclined to agree, right? I was like, yeah, man, our pass rush has been unbelievable. Like I said earlier, best word to describe our pass rush, relentless, right? It is relentless. It is we're constantly getting pressure with multiple guys. Multiple guys are feasting, and we have arguably the best cornerback room in the NFL, right? So our defense is amazing. We have all these great offensive weapons. It could make sense to bring in a proven talent, right? It could make sense to make the acknowledgement of, we have not been good in the past at drafting quarterbacks. That being the case, it could be a good idea to bring in a proven veteran. Again, not a fan of Jimmy G. I don't think Lamar Jackson is going anywhere. Derek Carr is an interesting option. So I'm curious what you guys thought with Derek Carr. So Dakota points out, Dakota says, please win New England. Please win New England. Please lose. Dakota also says we now need third place. And Kevin also points out at least the Chargers lost. So that's exactly the point. We're still in this, right? That's exactly the point. I think that's an important thing to point out, that I don't even want to think about it. But if we had a really shitty record, if we were losing a lot, if this team wasn't as good as it was, if we didn't have a potential to be in the playoffs, they wouldn't consider benching Zach. Not because he wasn't bad. Again, Zach Wilson was atrocious yesterday. But if there's no potential of winning turning into something, they don't bench him because you want to see what you have. So we have the potential to win. If we start, we have 7 games left. There's 7, and Robert Saleh pointed this out as well. So kind of, like I was joking with you guys before, we talk about so many different things. That was kind of the point I was getting at. If Zach Wilson wasn't as bad as he was, we, like we said earlier, would have turned around and said, we're only 6-4. We're still totally in this. We could still win a couple more games. We could still have double-digit wins. We could totally be in the playoffs. Hell, if things swing our way, we could freaking come back and win the AFC East. It's still in the realm of possibility. That's why they're considering this, because we have such a good team, because we've been winning like we have, because we have playoff potential. That's why they're considering, Zach Wilson, you've been atrocious. Maybe we should bench you and have somebody else play, because anybody would play better than you did yesterday. And that's the point. Anybody, literally anybody would play better than you did yesterday. And like you guys say, with potentially moving up, the Chargers losing, like Kevin points out, we need the Bengals and the Chargers to keep losing. We're still in this. We're 100% still in this. So that's why the conversation is, and again, it's important to point out, Robert Saleh hasn't made a decision yet, right? Robert Saleh, again, the biggest thing I took from that press conference was, I need more information to make an assessment. That was literally the biggest vibe I got from that. He wasn't ready. He did say that Zach Wilson is that he's not committing to Zach Wilson. So that's the only fact we got. The only fact we got was he did say that we're not committing to Zach Wilson as the starter. But he kept saying we need to look at more film. We need to evaluate things. Zach could be the starter potentially. Will Mike White be the starter? He said, we don't know. He didn't commit to anything else because he wants to go back and look at it. He wants to go back and look at the film and make a decision. But again, the whole point is, because this team has been playing so well, because the team other than Zach Wilson looks really good, and we're a winning team, that's why this is an option. That's why it's, even though we want to see what we have in this kid, you look like shit. We have to acknowledge it. You haven't played well. Your numbers are awful. And yesterday, you put up a performance that is not even remotely acceptable at an NFL level. What you did yesterday was, again, guys, like I said, abysmal, pathetic, pick your word. There's not a word worse enough to stress how terrible Zach Wilson's play was yesterday. The numbers are insane. They are nauseating. Like I said, even today, even after seeing the numbers 10 times, seeing them again puts a pit in my stomach. It makes me sick, literally sick. So because we still have a potential to be in this, that's why this is an option. But like we talked about before, Joe Flacco, we have to remember, even though he has played well, he looked so bad at points this year, we wanted to bench him. We have to remember that in the beginning of the season, we wanted to bench Joe Flacco because of how bad he looked. And we point out he's a statue back there. Our offensive line has not been good. Our offensive line has a lot of injuries, right? If Nate Herbig and like we talked about earlier, if Nate Herbig and Max Mitchell are going to play, that changes everything. But as of right now, our offensive line has not been good. Joe Flacco, the freaking statue back there, again, we wanted to bench him. And Mike White has had obviously one really great game, arguably two. Everything else has been garbage. Everything else for Mike White has been garbage. So I see all your guys' comments, and again, I'm curious. Please let me know what you guys think. One of the biggest things I'm thinking, and I wonder what you guys think. I want to know. So we talked about, what we could potentially do at quarterback, right? If we're moving, right? You guys mentioned Jimmy G. I said not a fan, right? Not a fan of Jimmy G, system quarterback. Talked about Lamar Jackson, said love that kid, but I don't see it as a possibility. I believe it was Kevin. Kevin, shout out to you, man. You mentioned Derek Carr. That is an interesting one. That is a very interesting one. That is definitely something that I would consider. So my question for you guys, I asked you, I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think it would take to get a Derek Carr? That's what I'm curious. What do you guys think it would cost to get Derek Carr? So shout out to all, I appreciate all your guys' comments. Again, let me know what you're thinking. Let me know your guys' thoughts. So Dakota points out Jets D is so hungry, it's crazy. And that's the point I mentioned earlier. The biggest thing that pissed me off the locker room, right? What Robert Sala's done, this is a culture change, right? All the guys he's brought in have, or at least from what we've expected or thought, what we've thought, have the right attitude. They want to win, right? They're part of this culture change, right? They our team is winning. So with how good with how good the defense played and how good the defense is playing, for Zach Wilson to feel like he's not the problem, for him to say that the offense wasn't the issue, that can cause massive fraction in the locker room. And that was my biggest fear. My biggest fear again was, and I talked about it, just earlier today, that Zach Wilson was atrocious. There's no question that Zach Wilson was absolutely atrocious yesterday. But the biggest thing was, the biggest, excuse me, guys, excuse me, the biggest thing was Zach Wilson's lack of accountability and the things that he said. That could cause massive fraction in the locker room, right? The defense was pissed off after the game. We saw it in the interviews. Garrett Wilson was pissed, right? We talked about that. This commonality, right? Started with Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, now Garrett Wilson being upset, our rookie wide receiver, an emerging superstar in Garrett Wilson verbally being upset, saying things like things aren't good at practice. That shows that there's a problem, right? That absolutely shows that there's a problem. So Dakota points out, Jets can go from fourth to third. That's the point. We're still in this, guys. We are 100% still in this. And that is the reason, like Robert Saleh literally said, everything is on the table. That is why he said that. Literally, another way to say that, considering all options, right? You're considering all options because if you do well in these next 7 games, you can be in the playoffs. If you do well in these next 7 games, you can have double-digit wins. Like we said, you can make the playoffs. So that is why everything is on the table. That is why these things are being considered. Dakota points out, New England will lose to Minnesota. Can't wait. We'll see, man. I mean, it's definitely possible. Definitely possible. New England could definitely lose to Minnesota. Minnesota has looked good. So yeah, so Dakota, great comments. Dakota's making a line. I want to know what the rest of you guys think as well. If you guys, have a thought, let me know what you guys are thinking. Dakota points out missing Corey Davis is huge for us. You guys know I mentioned it earlier in the season. The fact that people thought Corey Davis was on the trade block was hilarious to me. You guys remember, we joked about it when they said it. When they said Corey Davis was on the trade block, I laughed. I mean, we know he wasn't the wide receiver one that we thought he was going to be when he came in, right? We didn't have a wide receiver one at that point. We thought he could be that. He wasn't, and he took a lot of flack for it. But he's a damn good wide receiver too, right? He is next to Garrett Wilson, the best weapon on this offense. That's a fact. Next to Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis is the best receiving option on this offense. Not having him is absolutely huge. Again, not making excuses for Zach Wilson. What Zach Wilson did yesterday, it doesn't matter how bad the offensive line played. It doesn't matter that there was no running game. What he did is inexcusable. Absolutely pathetic. Same thing Dakota pointing out, missing Brees, missing AVT, all of it. All of it's huge. All of it is absolutely huge. It's a problem. But Zach Wilson was still atrocious. Zach Wilson was absolutely atrocious. So I love that. Shout out to Rusty, bro. Shout out to you, Rusty, man. That's so funny, man. Q, Huff, JFM, JJ, Clemens, Lawson. You said all of them. They should say they're colorblind all week and just light Zach up. Dude, bro, my biggest thing, one of the biggest things, that surprised me was, again, Garrett Wilson's comment. Garrett Wilson saying, literally, bringing the comment back up, Garrett Wilson literally saying it starts in practice. It's got to be better. Things we don't see and don't get called out. Shit's got to start getting called out. That's crazy to hear from a rookie. That is crazy to hear that from a rookie. And that literally tells you there's shit going on. That literally tells you there's shit going on in that practice that's not good. So, ooh, Dakota. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread. I saw the 7. I saw the 7. I thought you were only saying the Jets were going to get one more win. So I do want to take that back. I thought you were saying like 7-10 for a second. I was nervous. I saw the 7. So we will be we could definitely beat the Bears. The problem is, and again, that's kind of what makes the Zach Wilson situation so tough. Fields has been killing it. Justin Fields has been absolutely killing it lately. And that's what makes the situation so tough. You're watching a second-year quarterback doing really well. Mac Jones, the other quarterback in that draft, played really, again, not a great game, but played well against us in the win, which I thought was the big factor, right? I thought in the beginning of the game, well, the wind is the big factor here. The wind is the big factor that's screwing up Zach Wilson. But we got to be honest. We got to call the truth. I mean, Mac Jones had a damn good game in that same win. So I hope you're right, man. I hope we'll be 7-4 next week. So the interesting thing is, though, what are we going to do at quarterback, right? What are we going to do at quarterback? Is it going to be Zach Wilson or is it not going to be? We're probably going to find out. And you know what? Surprise here. We may not find out Wednesday, right? So here's an interesting fact. Just thought about this one, actually. We've seen a couple of times this season, Robert Saleh doesn't always tip his hand, right? We've seen a couple of times, like remember when, I don't know why I'm blanking, it was AVT at left tackle. That was one of them. It was AVT at left tackle. And I don't know why I'm blanking. There was another one as well. There were 2 situations this year where Robert Saleh didn't tip his hand, right? Robert Saleh said that, we have made the decision. We have it internalized in the building, but we don't want to let our opponent know, basically, right? We want to keep them on their toes. So we do need to brace ourselves, and I'm thinking about it now. We do need to actually brace ourselves and potentially be ready for the fact he may not tell us, right? Robert Saleh may, it's possible, right? Robert Saleh may turn around and on Wednesday or even wait till Friday and say, we've made a decision, right? We've looked at all the film, we've evaluated everything, and we've made a decision, and you're going to find out Sunday, right? He might literally say, you're going to find out Sunday. And just think about, again, we talked about those last other games in the past, how I liked it as well. I love that Robert Saleh didn't tip his hand. It kept the other team guessing, right? It kept the defense on their toes. They had to prepare for multiple contingencies. They didn't know what the case was going to be, right? Oh, I do remember it was Zach Wilson coming back, right? It was when Zach Wilson was coming back, ironically, when he was coming back, from injury, Robert Saleh didn't fully announce if Zach was going to be the guy or if Zach was going to play if he wasn't healthy to play, right? Remember, they asked Robert Saleh and he said, we have the answer in the building, but I'm going to keep that till game day. Remember, Robert Saleh did said that. He's like, I'm going to keep that till game day. And that keeps the defense guessing. So nothing keeps a team on their toes more than not knowing who the quarterback is, because Joe Flacco is a very different quarterback than Zach Wilson is. And Mike White is a very different quarterback than both of them. So there's a decent chance actually, that Robert Saleh could turn around and say, yes, we've watched the film. Yes, we've made our analysis. Yes, we've made our decision. You're going to find out game day. You're going to find out on game day. And you know what? That wouldn't be the worst thing, because again, think about, like we just said, the quarterback is easily the most important component of the offense. Whoever your quarterback is, it changes everything. If it's a different guy, right? That would be so big. I'll actually be honest, the more I'm thinking about it now, I kind of want that. And please don't hate me. You guys can tell me in the comments what you think. I know you want to know. I know for a fact you want to know. But think about how big that would be for the Chicago Bears to not know who our quarterback is. Think about how big it would be for Chicago to say, oh shit, we have to prepare for a potential Zach Wilson and a potential Joe Flacco and a potential Mike White. They're all different quarterbacks. They all do things differently. They all play differently. They all read the field differently. Shit, their heads might spin and they might explode. The Bears' heads might blow up because they won't be able to handle it. So, again, and you guys can let me know what you think. I mean, excuse me. We want to know, right? We want to know as fans, but We also want to win, right? Like we said before, we're all Jet fans, right? We want to win. We want these W's, right? We're in a position that, again, even with how bad Zach Wilson played, it's why we didn't think about it. We're still 6-4. We're still 100% in this. That being the case, nothing mixes shit up more than them not knowing who your quarterback is. So I think that might be a really good idea. I think that might actually be a really good idea to potentially go into the game on Sunday and them not know who the guy is, right? They're not going to know which of the three guys it's going to be. They have to prepare for everybody. That would definitely be a shakeup, right? So appreciate all your guys' comment. Dakota shouting out the whole defense. Love it, Dakota. Dakota shouting out the whole defense, saying the defense is scary, heavily scary. Lawson's a tank. JFM's a beast. RD is elite. RO just has to be more consistent, right? That's definitely a fact. Definitely a fact, Melvin. Big Q. Dakota's saying big Q, right? So Melvin is saying Jimmy G out here throwing dimes. I do. And again, I personally feel that Jimmy G is a system quarterback. I'm not saying he's bad. I do. I'm not saying that Jimmy G is a bad quarterback, but he's the guy that if you put him in a good system, he can play well, but he's never going to be that guy to elevate you. We saw it in the Super Bowl, right? If you put the game on his back, he's going to let you down. And that's not what I like. I feel like Lamar Jackson, he can be a great quarterback. Derek Carr, he can be a great quarterback, right? I don't believe Jimmy G can be. Okay. Dakota saying JJ's a beast already. Love it. Love it. So Dakota saying Jimmy G a beast. I mean, if you look at what he's done, so I'll bring it up to point out to you guys. If you look at what Jimmy G has done this season, the numbers are good, right? I mean, the numbers are good. He's had mostly good. He's got 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season, right? He had a pretty good year last year, right? His completion percentages are always pretty high. That's the one thing I will give Jimmy Garoppolo. If I'm going to give Jimmy Garoppolo credit, his completion percentages are always quite high. That is a thing. But again, I don't believe Jimmy G is the answer. I believe Jimmy G is a really good system quarterback. I don't think he's the guy to elevate your team to bring you to the next level. So Dakota points out Jimmy G has been proved he can win. He can win with what you give him. Jimmy G would be fire with the Jets right now. I mean, he was good, right? He definitely is good. And that's the point. I'm not saying he's not, right? I'm saying Jimmy G can be a good quarterback. I don't see him as a great quarterback, and I don't see him as a guy that you can put the team on his back. I see him as a guy, like you're saying right there, that if there's a really good team around him, then he can play well. But I want more. I mean, if you're saying you want to bring in Jimmy G to potentially be like a temporary guy to see, who we could, if Zach can be the guy down the future, or if maybe we go in a different direction, that I don't hate 100%. But if you want Jimmy G to be your franchise quarterback, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of that. So, like Dakota says, Jimmy G, Carr, or Rodgers. So that's an interesting one, right? Earlier in the season, people joked about that, right? Earlier in the offseason, people joked about the Jets potentially trading for Aaron Rodgers, right? People joked about that potentially. I mean, again, that's what we were talking about before, right? Perfect example. We've seen teams do this before. The Denver Broncos, right? Like we said, the Denver Broncos had one of the best, arguably the best defenses in the NFL. They had a quality offense. They just needed the quarterback. They got Peyton Manning, took him to a Super Bowl, right? I mean, Aaron Rodgers could be potentially a good option. So obviously, Aaron Rodgers is great. That I would love. I mean, who wouldn't love that, right? Who wouldn't love Aaron Rodgers? I mean, who wouldn't love that one? But I mean, that would be interesting. Definitely be interesting. I mean, again, Aaron Rodgers is amazing. Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks. You put him on this team, that's straight fire. That is literally straight fire. So, and the thing with Aaron Rodgers is he's the kind of guy if you trade for, you could see, that's a kind of guy Zach Wilson could learn from, right? If you trade for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, that's the perfect guy for Zach Wilson to sit on the bench watch him play and learn from his play, watch what he's doing, learn from what he's doing, and see if he can potentially be the guy, right? So that would be a big thing, bringing a guy again like Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he's a great quarterback. The team's all around him, so we could have a great season. But that would be a guy with Zach Wilson can't learn from Aaron Rodgers. He can't learn, right? Zach Wilson clearly can't be the guy, right? So shout out to Benny. Appreciate all your guys. Appreciate all your guys' comments. Benny's like, "Oh my god, that game yesterday was so depressing to watch." Dude, we were talking about that. Those numbers, that was rough. I mean, at least the defense was good, right? The one silver lining was the defense. It was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting to watch. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah. So that's kind of my point, though, and that's kind of where I'm going with. And I like that you bring that up. So shout out to Rusty Spooner. Ruster points out Rex Grossman took the Bears to the Super Bowl. But what happened? Right? Jimmy Garoppolo took his team to the Super Bowl. But what happened? Those are guys, again, I look at them as really good system quarterbacks. I look at those guys, if they're in a really good system, if you put a really good team around them, they can be good, but they're never going to be great. They're never going to be, oh my God, like, love this guy. And they're never going to be the guy that you can put the team on their back and is going to take you to the next level. So, and that was kind of how we felt, Benny, right? That Benny points out that's literally how we felt, right? Like Benny saying, you didn't think the Jets could score on offense. The only way you felt they could score was defensively. I mean, that offense, again, we talked about it before. I don't even want to keep talking about it, right? I don't even want to keep talking about it. That's how nauseating it was. All the stuff like you're saying there, it was nauseating, absolutely nauseating. So, like Dakota points out, number 12, Old Man Rogers, definitely. That would be a really interesting one because, again, that's you making the acknowledgement that this team is ready to win now, right? You're saying, like we said, this defense stacked. And we were saying it, right? Everyone was saying that this team is ready to go, ready to make a playoff run, but the quarterback is what's holding us back. Jimmy G can be good, but Derek Carr can be a lot better, and Aaron Rodgers would be amazing. Aaron Rodgers is best case scenario. And again, especially the best part of bringing in a guy like Aaron Rodgers, he's an older dude. He's a guy that doesn't have that much time left. So you bring in a guy like Aaron Rodgers, then he can potentially, Zach can hopefully sit on the bench and learn from him and watch, this is how you become a great quarterback. And if you think about it, that's what Aaron Rodgers did, right? That's the Green Bay formula of success, right? They had Aaron Rodgers sit for a few years behind Brett Favre, and then he came in, and the rest was history. So, perfect example, right? Aaron Rodgers is the perfect example of a situation, a quarterback benefiting from sitting, right? Benefiting from sitting on the bench, learning from watching others play, and becoming better, right? And that's kind of like what Dakota says here. Exactly what I'm saying, man. Rodgers to Wilson. So, Zach, clearly it's not clicking, right? Clearly it's not clicking. His play has been awful. Again, like we talked about, I expected a lot more from him at this point. All the things, like I was saying, that I loved in him, all the reasons I believed in him are the things that he's doing bad. They're all the things, we went through it before. Every single one of them are the things that he's doing poorly, that I'm not liking in what I'm seeing from him. So clearly he has to fix that up. Clearly that's not working. So if he can learn from a guy like Aaron Rodgers, that's best case situation. And look at the Denver Broncos, right? That could be the blueprint. This team is so stacked. Our defense is, again, arguably the best in the NFL. Our offense, think about it. If Aaron Rodgers comes in, that's next year. That means Breece Hall is back. Max Mitchell's ready to go, right? AVT is back. If Aaron Rodgers is on that stacked offense with another draft, right? Joe Douglas has a whole nother draft to build this team. And if they bring in an old man, like you said, Old Man Rodgers, then they can use those draft picks to put more talent on, right? Put more talent on the offensive line. Maybe bring in another receiver potentially, right? So our defense, again, arguably the best in the NFL. You bring in a guy like Aaron Rodgers, he's the kind of guy that can win now. He's the kind of guy that can take this team to the next level. But it's important to think about, right? Right now, right? I do want to circle back for a second. It's important to think about the right now because, right, that's why, like I mentioned before, and I think it's important to think about if we were losing, if we had a bad record, if there was no possibility of us going to the playoffs, I personally don't think that even with how bad Zach Wilson was yesterday, I don't think they would consider benching him then because there's no point. We're not going. And again, for you guys who are just tuning in, so you guys tuning in, we were just saying that if, excuse me, if the Jets, weren't in a good situation, if the Jets had a losing record, if they weren't playing well, if the playoffs weren't a possibility, then I don't think we would even consider benching Zach Wilson. And that's not because he wasn't bad. Believe me, he was a freaking train wreck. He was god awful yesterday. Again, like we said, not enough bad words, not enough vocabulary words to say how bad Zach Wilson was yesterday. Like the words aren't even there. But you want to evaluate him, right? You want to see, can he turn it around? Can he be better? The reason this is being considered is because we're a winning team, right? We said this. If it weren't for how terrible Zach was yesterday, we would be talking about the fact that we're 6-4. We're still in this. There's 7 games left in this season. We are still very much in this, very much in the playoff hunt. That being the case, that's why this is the option. Because we're thinking, again, what Zach did yesterday is unacceptable. Unacceptable at an NFL level. So we need to see, Robert Saleh, like he said, we need to evaluate what is the best position, who is the best player for us to win, right? Who is the best person to put out there, right? Not for the future, forget the future, forget next year, right? Who's the best person to put out there right now to keep this team winning? Because the defense is playing great, right? The defense is playing so well that even with how pathetically bad Zach was, we were still in these games. That means even with somewhat competent quarterback play, we would have won that freaking game. So that's the point. Robert Saleh is saying that is beyond unacceptable. What we saw yesterday, beyond unacceptable. We are in a position to be in the playoffs. We need to put the person on the field that gives us the best chance to win. And like Robert Saleh said, it could still be Zach Wilson when we're done evaluating everything. But it might be Joe Flacco, and it might be Mike White. Yep. Shout out to Dakota. Dakota said that sounds lovely. So, and to be fair, though, that's thinking future, right? We're thinking future, right? We're thinking future right now, right? That's future with Aaron Rodgers. But to be fair, we have to think about right now, right? Right now, we can jump ahead and think about, how great it would be to bring in Aaron Rodgers, how great that would be for Zach Wilson's development, right? How great it would be to bring in Aaron Rodgers, for him to develop and learn from him to sit behind, to give this team a winning opportunity. But we got to think about the right now. The right now is what really matters, right? Because we are still in this. And that's why everything is on the table, because we are still in this. So Benny jokes around. That's funny, Benny. Just needed to give Geno a decade to develop. Man, I hope that's not the case with Zach. I absolutely hope that's not the case with Zach. So Dakota's saying Mike White. Dakota's saying Mike White, says he prefers Mike White. Again, it's interesting. The way I look at it is, like we said before, if Herbig is banged up, so even if Nate Herbig plays, he's not 100. We have to remember that. Even if Nate Herbig plays, he's not 100%, right? So, but if Herbig does play and Max Mitchell is back, that changes everything. That changes that offensive line. If the offensive line can play well and keep Joe Flacco safe, that makes him a decent option. But if not, we have a problem. That dude's a statue back there. We saw in the weeks where he was just constantly under bombardment, he was awful. Again, we can't forget that we wanted to bench him. And Mike White, again, I know we're excited. We're excited because, again, our defense has been so good that even if we have somewhat good, somewhat decent quarterback play, we can win games. And that's how we're looking at it. Even if Mike White can just be okay, right? Even if Mike White, because Zach Wilson is not even okay. He's not even okay right now. But if Mike White can just be okay, then maybe we got a shot, right? Maybe we have a shot. And that's how they're maybe looking at it. So that's not a bad way to look at it, but Mike White is not a great quarterback. And that's the problem, right? We saw that this year. We saw that last year a little bit as well. He had a really good first game, but after that, he's played poorly. He has played poorly and he's had made mistakes. So again, you know, with as bad as, it's been, right? With as bad as Zach Wilson was and as good as our defense was keeping us in the game, that's the way Robert Saleh is going to approach this. He's going to go again, like we said, well, Zach was terrible. Zach was absolutely awful. He was so pathetic that even with how amazing the defense was, they still couldn't pull this out. Again, the numbers, beyond nauseating, beyond nauseating. Our defense has been so great that even with okay quarterback play, we can win football games. And we're in a position right now with 7 games left. And that's how they're looking at it. And again, it comes down to the Jets, right? And that's how we have to appreciate the way Robert Saleh is looking at this, right? Robert Saleh is literally saying, right, that it's all about winning, right? And this team has a chance. This team has playoff potential. We need to put the best product on the field to be able to keep winning and make the playoffs, whatever that means. So shout out to Rusty. Rusty points out, I want to see how Streveler would do. I think he can handle it. It is interesting to point out now. So I did mention before, right, that when they asked in the past, when they asked Robert Saleh about Joe Flacco being inactive, he didn't hesitate to say Mike White was QB2, right? He didn't hesitate to say Mike White is the QB2. When they asked him, is Mike White going to be the quarterback? Robert Saleh literally threw his hands up and said, we don't know, right? Everything came down to, like we said, he kept saying, I need to look at more. That was the universal take for everything Robert Saleh said, that I need to look at more. I need to evaluate more. I need to see more film to make a final decision. That being the case, right, we do have to remember that, yes, if you guys remember, I wanted Streveler to make the 53-man roster. I really wanted Streveler to make the 53-man because, and again, Zach Wilson's been a train wreck, but for the reasons we felt Zach Wilson fit this offense well are the same reasons we thought Chris Streveler would fit this offense well. But we do need to remember, Chris Streveler did what he did against not just backups, but third stringers as well. Chris Streveler did what he did against guys that aren't even on an NFL roster anymore, a good amount of them. So that being the case, what he would do against starters is very different. So I think the way Robert Saleh is going to look at it is kind of like that, yeah, Chris Streveler, looked really good against backups, but we have to remember the fact of the matter is we are in a winning position right now, right? We are in a position where, again, if the quarterback play wasn't as atrocious as it was yesterday, this would be the topic of conversation. The topic of conversation would be, we're only 6-4, right? We're only 6-4. We still have a lot of potential. Excuse me. We're only 6-4. There's 7 games left in the season, right? We could still win enough games to even get double-digit wins. That's why, again, like Robert Saleh said, everything is on the table. So I don't disagree, Rusty. I am interested to see what Streveler would do, but I honestly don't know if they're considering him for that reason. He didn't do what he did against starters. We've seen Joe Flacco against starters. We've seen Mike White against starters. Again, neither one has been great, but we don't need them to be great. We just need them to be better than what Zach Wilson was, and we need them to be okay. If they can be okay with this defense, we can win games. And if we can win games, we can potentially make the playoffs and go from there. And as we've talked about in the past, once you make the playoffs, nothing else matters. Once you make the playoffs, it's all about just keep winning, baby. So that's what it is. And that's what you got to love, right? Robert Saleh, I think that's what today's presser showed the most. I think today's presser showed the most that Robert Saleh is saying, we want to make the playoffs. Our eyes are toward winning and our eyes are toward making the playoffs. And we're going to do whatever we think we need to do to be able to make that happen. So Junio Rudy, shout out to you, man. Junio Rudy says, I think the Jets need to take responsibility for Zach Wilson's development. Hindsight is 2020, but Zach Wilson should have never touched the field last year. I don't know why they were so enamored with playing rookie quarterbacks week one. We kind of mentioned it just before with Aaron Rodgers, right? Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre for years. He sat behind a great quarterback for years, learning from him, and that made him better. Right? That's when he came out and became a great quarterback. There is nothing wrong with sitting. I think it's again because he was the second overall pick and there weren't that many great options ahead of him. If we had like a really good option, like let's say Flacco was just killing it and lighting it up like a madman and putting up unbelievable games, then the question could have been arose of, well, maybe Zach Wilson can sit a little bit and learn a little bit. It just didn't work out in the situation. But the point now is, like we said before, if Zach Wilson gets benched, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not the answer, right? That doesn't necessarily mean he's not the answer. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're, lost all complete faith in Zach Wilson. That's their way of saying what you did was completely unacceptable. What you did in that game was, again, if a quarterback would have done that in their first ever game, we would have been saying that that's disgusting and that's ridiculous. You're saying that is unacceptable and we're going to be looking at other options. And if he gets benched, it's a learning experience, right? Hopefully it's a learning experience that he can learn from, get better from, like he did last year, maybe get a different perspective from the sideline and maybe fix that attitude a little bit, right? Maybe have a more humble attitude. So like Benny points out, kind of like what we were just saying, right? I said it. That's been my take through the whole thing, right? My whole take has been Zach Wilson was atrocious yesterday, but what upset me more was his attitude. What upset me more was his answer because of the potential fraction in the locker room. Our defense played so great after how bad our offense was. It was clear the defensive players were going to be pissed. We saw it in their answers. We saw it in the answers that Sauce Gardner gave, right? Our defensive players were going to be pissed. To come out and say that you don't think the offense was the problem, right? For the rumors of that Zach Wilson thinks that he personally isn't the problem, that scares me, right? That scares me with potential fraction in the locker room. So Dakota says sack Wilson. Dakota's saying sack Wilson, put him in the garbage can. Dakota's got the garbage can ready. Dakota's ready to drop him right in the trash. So Benny, yeah, we talked about that before, man. Benny, we talked about that. That Josh Allen, a veteran quarterback, right? A veteran quarterback, one of the best in the league. Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he took accountability. Zach Wilson did not, right? And Junior, we talked about that as well. We also talked about, that the Jets are shitty drafters, right? That's been the problem. That if Zach, keeps playing badly, we've had really bad luck drafting quarterbacks. So that being the case with the bad luck we've had drafting quarterbacks, it's understandable why some fans might say, like, we were just saying, well, this team is stacked, ready to go. Maybe we should bring in a veteran, right? Bringing in a guy like Derek Carr is a little more interesting because that's a guy that has a future, right? That's a guy that has years left in him. A guy like Aaron Rodgers, it's like when the Denver Broncos brought Peyton Manning in. You're bringing him in saying this team is ready to win now and we want to win now. And again, like we said, Aaron Rodgers benefited from sitting behind Brett Favre. Zach Wilson could hopefully benefit from sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. That could definitely be a thing. So Rusty points out, we can't afford to give up draft stock. We know that's not a Joe Douglas thing. Joe Douglas usually does not give up draft stock. We got to do, the smart thing. You say you want to draft a center. You guys remember my big take was we need a left tackle, right? I mean, not saying Connor McGovern is great, but he's not terrible either. He's consistently been an average to pretty good center, right? We need a left tackle. We absolutely need a left tackle. You guys remember my take on it. We've been here for a long time now, so just going through it a little quicker, right? We've said that Mekhi Becton is definitely not the answer. Well, sorry, we've said that Mekhi Becton, when he comes back, who knows, right? Who knows what he could be? But you can't go into next season expecting any from him. You can't go into next season expecting anything from him. The fact that he hasn't ever played a full season yet, Joe Douglas has to rectify that mistake. Now, you guys know my take. I feel like Laken Tomlinson hasn't been bad, but he has not played at a Pro Bowl level. Joe Douglas, being the great GM he is, put a potential out in Laken Tomlinson's contract. I would really like us to draft a top left tackle in next year's draft, put AVT at left guard. You got Herbig and Max Mitchell on the right side at right guard and right tackle, Connor McGovern at center. You can draft a later round center, like maybe second or third round, to maybe sit behind Govern for a year or two. That's what I like. That's what I like. So that's an interesting one, Melvin. You say, can Derek Carr handle the New York media? New York media ain't easy, right? That's the problem with Zach Wilson, right? He gave a bad answer. If you don't do the right thing, the New York media is going to get you, right? So attitude-wise, that one I'd have to think about. I would have to think about, is Derek Carr, got the personality to handle the New York media? But we do have to remember right now, again, we're looking toward next year, right? All you guys are. All you guys right now are looking toward next year. But we have to remember the whole reason Robert Saleh saying everything is on the table is because we are a potential playoff team. We're a team that's 6-4 with a winning record with 7 games left that has the potential to make the playoffs. Hell, if things swing the right way, we still have the potential to win our division technically. That being the case, that's why everything is on the table. So yes, it's nice to look toward next year, but let's think about right now. Let's think about winning right now. And again, like we said, if this team was losing and there was no potential to win, I don't think they would consider benching Zach Wilson. They'd want to continue to see what they have in him. They'd want to say, let's let him keep playing and see if he can turn it around or not. Because we have this potential, that's why they're not willing to risk it. They don't want to say, well, what if he keeps sucking for a couple of games? We want a guy in there that can win, right? Maybe it might be Zach Wilson, like we said, right? They might choose to stick with Zach Wilson. They might go with Joe Flacco. They might go with Mike White. But the whole conversation is we want to keep winning. We want to put somebody out there that can play well enough that with this defense, they can win games, and then we can potentially make the playoffs. So again, it's nice to think about next year, but it's about right now, right? Right now, and that's the whole point, like we just said. Right now, we have the potential to make the playoffs. So that is why everything is on the table, and Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are looking at everything because they want to figure out what can we do to put the best product on the field offensively so that we can win football games. And that's what we were saying before, Dakota, man. We were saying Zach Wilson was so bad yesterday. That was the joke I made when we first started out. Any of us could have done better. He was so bad yesterday that probably one of us, Dakota's saying he's only 27. Maybe they'll give you a call, bro. maybe they'll give you a call. Maybe, they could bring you up. We'll find out. They'll elevate you and Chris. They'll bring Chris and you up, man. But it's true, man. I totally agree, right? That, that he was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. Right? So appreciate all your guys' comments. Appreciate all, what you guys are thinking, all the comments you guys have. So a lot of you guys mentioned, like Mike says, Lamar Jackson. You guys remember my take. I love Lamar Jackson, right? I mentioned it before. I talked about how loved him in 2018. That was my guy. Always thought this guy could be a franchise quarterback. I hated the fact that people were saying that he should be a wide receiver, crap like that. And then I hated in his rookie year that people are saying he can't be a pocket quarterback and all he can do is run. I always said Lamar Jackson is a franchise quarterback. That being the case, even though a deal hasn't gotten done, I believe it will get done. I believe the Baltimore Ravens, like we said, with Ozzie Newsome gifting them Lamar Jackson, they know what they have in him. I can't see Lamar Jackson leaving Baltimore. If he does, sign me up as fast as hell. Remember, I said that before. If he does, sign me up as fast as you can. But I don't see Lamar Jackson leaving. So I appreciate all your guys' comments. I appreciate all the things you guys are, saying, all the things you guys are thinking. Appreciate all of it, all of it. Really do appreciate all of it. we have been here, and I hope you guys do appreciate it because it is just me, and I do have a cold. I do have a cold. I am struggling a bit. If you can hear it in my voice, I've been here with you guys, just myself, for almost 3 hours now. So I love talking with you guys. I absolutely love talking to you guys about the Jets. You've been here for almost 3 hours. I really appreciate you guys. If you haven't, and if you guys out there, if you're not, if you could please subscribe to the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated. So if you can please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. If you have any friends, want to let them know if they could subscribe as well, I would really appreciate that as well. But yeah, guys, trying to bring you as, the best I can. Been here on my own with you guys for almost 3 hours. Try to give you guys the best takes I can. Try to give you guys, all my takes and everything I think. But I really appreciate you guys tuning in. But it has almost been 3 hours. I'm pretty exhausted. I do got to get going, but I think it's pretty awesome that I've been able to able to talk with you guys for 3 hours, right? I think that's pretty freaking awesome. So I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part of the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. Again, you got me. If you guys can please subscribe. Again, if you haven't, appreciate you, Michael. Michael just said he subscribed. Yeah, man, I'm sweating. I'm sweating because it's just me. I mean, I usually bring on guests, as you guys know. I usually bring on guests, but you guys know Zach Wilson was my guy. And that's why I wanted to talk to you guys personally about this. That's why it felt important to me, right? Because Zach Wilson is the guy that I was championing, right? He was the guy that I believed in arguably more than anybody. So that's why I wanted to come to you guys mano a mano. That's why I wanted to come to you guys and talk to you guys about how I felt, how my opinion has changed, how my take on Zach Wilson has changed. I want to be honest with you guys. And I always try to be honest with you guys. Tell me how you guys, let you know what you guys are thinking. Appreciate you, Melvin. Appreciate you, man, hitting the like. All you guys out there, if you can hit that like too, really appreciate it. Again, I'm sweating pretty crazy. I was with you guys for almost 3 hours. I think this is definitely the longest I've ever done on my own. But yeah, was with you guys for almost 3 hours. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys being here. Again, if you guys can subscribe, greatly appreciated. I'll be bringing you guys content through the week as we go. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, and make sure you stay tuned, right? But remember, I do want to leave with that one thing I said earlier before, because I think it's a big thing. The one thing I said before, even if Robert Saleh makes a QB decision, don't expect him to show his cards, right? Because remember, we saw just earlier in the season, Robert Saleh not show his cards and, not show his hand, and it really was beneficial. What's better than keeping a team guessing, right? And what's more keeping a team guessing than who the quarterback's going to be, right? All of our quarterbacks are different from one another, right? So don't be surprised if Robert Saleh does, like we said, if Robert Saleh comes out and says, well, we've made a decision, and you're going to find out game day. And what better to keep the Chicago Bears on their damn toes? So appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if you guys could subscribe, be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys for being here. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Again, I've been with you guys for a really long time tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed the content. You guys have a great night. Take care. I will see you guys next time. Remember, I'm always here every Monday night. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and let's go Jets. Remember, even though we had bad QB play yesterday, we're still 6-4. We're still 6-4, and that's why, again, everything is on the table. Everything is on the table, because if we can get this figured out and we can get back to winning, we can get back to the playoffs, and that's what matters. What matters is winning, putting the best product on the field, potentially getting to the playoffs, and once you get there, maybe the Super Bowl, man. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you for being here. Hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. And let's go Jets. Let's figure this thing out.